They threw her to a monster expecting screams. What they got was a reckoning. Tonight, you're about to witness how a woman sent to disappear became the force that shattered an empire. This isn't a fairy tale. It's survival weaponized. Before we begin, hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. You're going to need to buckle up for this one, because what starts as cruelty in the rain ends with kings kneeling and lies burning. This is the story of Vera and the crime lord who refused to break her. The rain came down like punishment. Vera felt it needling her scalp, streaming down her face in cold rivulets that mixed with blood from the gash above her eyebrow. Her knees hit gravel and she gasped, not from pain, though there was plenty of that, but from the shock of sudden stillness after hours of movement. Rough hands, car trunks, muffled voices arguing in a language she didn't fully understand but recognized in her bones as negotiation over worthless goods. She was the goods. The iron gates behind her clanged shut with a finality that made her stomach drop. Somewhere in the darkness ahead, water dripped from eaves onto stone. The estate sprawled before her like something out of an old movie, all sharp angles and shadows, windows that reflected nothing back. No lights in most of them. A place that existed to swallow things. Get up. The voice came from one of the men who'd dragged her here. Victor. She'd heard the others call him that. He spoke English with an accent that turned every word into a threat. His boot connected with her ribs. Not hard enough to break anything, just enough to remind her she was breakable. Vera pushed herself up. Her hands were zip-tied in front of her, the plastic cutting into swollen wrists. She'd stopped struggling hours ago. Struggling gave them satisfaction, and she'd learned young that satisfaction was leverage. Give people nothing, and sometimes they'd forget you were there long enough for you to slip away. Not this time, though. This time she'd been traded like livestock, and the men who'd done the trading were already backing toward the gate with the kind of nervous energy that said they wanted distance between themselves and whatever came next. "Mr. Vale," Victor called toward the house. "We brought her, like you said. Compensation." The word landed in Vera's chest like a stone. Compensation. For what? She didn't know. Didn't matter. She was currency now, handed over to settle a debt she hadn't incurred. The front door opened. No flood of light, just a wedge of dim gold that widened slowly, and a figure stepping through it with the unhurried grace of someone who'd never had to rush toward anything in his life. The rain seemed to bend around him, or maybe Vera's vision was tunneling from shock and exhaustion. She blinked hard, trying to focus. Ronin Vale. She'd heard the name whispered in the 3 days since her world had collapsed, heard it spoken with the kind of fear people reserved for natural disasters. A crime lord who controlled everything from shipping routes to judges, who could make people vanish with a phone call, who ruled the city's underworld with a precision that made other predators look like amateurs. And she'd been thrown at his feet like a sacrifice. He stopped at the edge of the portico, just where the rain started, close enough for Vera to see him clearly now. Tall, maybe 40, maybe older. Hard to tell with men who lived in shadows. Dark hair going silver at the temples. Eyes that caught the light wrong, reflective and flat like a cat's. He wore a shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, no jacket despite the cold. And he looked at her the way someone might look at a package delivered to the wrong address. Bored. That boredom terrified her more than rage would have. "Compensation," Ronin repeated, tasting the word. His voice was quiet, almost conversational. "For what exactly?" Victor shifted his weight. "The shipment. Last month. Gregor thought he could steal from me and apologize with a woman." Ronin's gaze hadn't left Vera. "Is that the narrative?" "She's clean," Victor said quickly, too quickly. "No diseases, no drugs, 24 years old. She worked at, I didn't ask for her resume." Ronin's interruption was soft, but Victor's mouth snapped shut like he'd been slapped. "I asked what Gregor thought he was accomplishing." Silence. The rain filled it, steady and cold. Vera's legs were shaking. She locked her knees, willing herself to stay upright. If she fell now, she didn't think she'd get back up. Her mind was racing through possibilities, none of them good. She'd seen enough crime dramas to know how this worked. Men like Ronin Vale didn't accept human offerings out of mercy. They accepted them because bodies were easy to dispose of, and screams didn't carry far in houses like this. She was going to die here. The thought settled over her with strange clarity. After everything, after clawing her way out of foster care, after working 3 jobs to pay for community college, after finally thinking she'd built something stable, it was going to end in the rain at the feet of a stranger who looked at her like she was an inconvenience. Look at me. It took Vera a moment to realize Ronin was speaking to her, not Victor. She'd been staring at the gravel, at the small rocks digging into her knees. She lifted her head slowly. Their eyes met. Ronin tilted his head slightly, studying her with the kind of focus that made her skin crawl. Not the hungry focus of the men who'd grabbed her off the street, who'd pawed at her in the van while debating her value. This was different, clinical, like he was solving a puzzle she didn't know she represented. "What's your name?" he asked. "Vera." Her voice came out hoarse, barely audible over the rain. She swallowed and tried again. "Vera Cade." "And what did Gregor tell you about this arrangement, Vera Cade?" "Nothing. The truth." "I don't know anyone named Gregor. I was closing up the diner where I work. They grabbed me off the street." Something flickered across Ronin's face. Not quite surprise, more like confirmation of something he'd already suspected. He looked past her at Victor and the 2 other men hovering near the gate. "So Gregor didn't just steal from me. He also abducted a random woman to cover his theft." Victor's face went pale. "We didn't know. He said she was willing—" "Get out." 2 words. Ronin didn't raise his voice, didn't move, but the men scrambled backward like he'd pulled a gun. The gate clanged open. Footsteps running, car doors slamming, an engine roaring to life. Taillights disappeared into the rain-soaked darkness. And then it was just Vera and Ronin Vale and the sound of water hitting stone. Vera's heart hammered against her ribs. This was worse. Being alone with him was worse. At least with witnesses, there'd been a chance he'd maintain some pretense of civility. Now there was nothing between her and whatever he wanted to do. "Stand up." She tried. Her legs wouldn't cooperate. The adrenaline that had kept her upright was draining away, leaving nothing but bone-deep exhaustion and the kind of terror that made her muscles liquid. Ronin sighed, a sound that might have been annoyance or something else. He stepped off the portico into the rain, and Vera flinched violently. She couldn't help it. Her body remembered hands that grabbed and hurt, and it braced for more of the same. He stopped. For a long moment, he just stood there in the downpour, getting soaked, watching her tremble on the gravel. Then he crouched down, putting himself at her eye level, but staying out of arm's reach. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said. Vera laughed. She didn't mean to, it just bubbled up, bitter and sharp. "Right. You don't believe me. Why the hell would I believe you?" The words came out before she could stop them, fueled by exhaustion and fear and the absolute certainty that she was already dead. So what did it matter? "You're Ronin Vale. I've heard the stories. You disappear people. You own half the cops in the city. Men like you don't—" She cut herself off, but too late. "Men like me don't what?" Ronin's voice stayed level, almost curious. "Don't let witnesses walk away." Vera met his eyes again, defiant even though her whole body was shaking. "So either kill me or don't, but stop pretending this ends any other way." The silence stretched. Rain drummed on Ronin's shoulders, plastering his shirt to his skin. His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes shifted. A recalculation happening in real time. "You were sent to be erased," he said finally. "Gregor picked me specifically because he thought I'd make you disappear. Quietly, cleanly. A gift that required no gratitude because there'd be no proof it ever happened." He paused. "They chose the wrong man." Vera didn't understand. Couldn't parse what he meant. Her brain felt like static. Ronin stood, water streaming off him. "Can you walk?" "I what?" "Can you walk or do I need to carry you?" The question was so absurd, so disconnected from every expectation she'd built, that Vera just stared at him. Ronin waited, patient as the rain. Finally, she nodded. "Then come inside. You're going into shock." He turned and walked back toward the house, not checking to see if she followed. Vera knelt there on the gravel, her zip-tied hands numb, her mind spinning. This was a trick. Had to be. Men like him didn't show mercy to women dumped at their feet. They used them or killed them or sold them to someone who would. But her body was shutting down. She could feel it. The way her fingers wouldn't close properly, the way her vision kept narrowing at the edges. Hypothermia creeping in. If she stayed out here much longer, she'd collapse, and then whatever Ronin planned wouldn't matter because she'd be dead anyway. Vera struggled to her feet. Every muscle screamed. She took one step, then another, following Ronin Vale into the house that logic said she shouldn't enter. The warmth hit her like a wall. She gasped, stumbling across the threshold into a foyer that looked like it belonged in a museum. Marble floors. A chandelier that probably cost more than she'd make in 10 years. Paintings on the walls that she couldn't focus on because her whole body had started shaking violently now that it wasn't braced against the cold. Ronin closed the door. The sound of the rain became muffled, distant. "Give me your hands." Vera flinched again, but obeyed, holding out her zip-tied wrists. Ronin pulled a knife from his pocket, a wicked thing with a black blade, and Vera's breath stopped. But he just slid it under the plastic and cut upward. The tie snapped. Blood rushed back into her hands with a pain that made her gasp. "There's a bathroom through there," Ronin gestured to a hallway. "Hot shower. I'll have clothes brought." "Why?" The question came out broken. Ronin looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time she saw something in his face that wasn't calculation. Anger, maybe, or disgust, but not directed at her. "Because you're cold," he said simply, "and wet, and bleeding, and those are problems with solutions." He paused. "I am many things, Vera Cade, but I'm not the man Gregor thought I was." Before she could respond, he was walking away, disappearing through a doorway into the depths of the house. A woman appeared from nowhere, middle-aged, wearing an apron, her face carefully neutral. She gestured for Vera to follow. "Come on, dear, let's get you cleaned up." Vera followed because she didn't know what else to do. The bathroom was enormous, all white tile and gold fixtures. The woman started the shower, adjusted the temperature, set out towels so fluffy they looked surreal. Then she left without a word, and Vera was alone with the sound of running water and her own ragged breathing. She stripped off her ruined clothes with shaking hands, stepped under the spray. The heat was agony on her cold skin, but she endured it, watching pink-tinged water swirl down the drain, blood from the cut on her face, dirt from the gravel, evidence washing away. She waited for the door to slam open, for hands to grab her, for the other shoe to drop. It didn't. After 20 minutes, when her skin was red and her fingers were prunes and the shaking had mostly stopped, Vera turned off the water. Someone had left clothes on the counter, soft cotton pants, a t-shirt, a hoodie, all in her size, which should have been impossible but somehow wasn't. She dressed slowly, half expecting the fabric to dissolve, to reveal this whole thing as a hallucination brought on by trauma. But the clothes stayed solid, real. When she emerged, the woman was waiting. "This way?" They walked through hallways that seemed to go on forever, past rooms with closed doors, up a flight of stairs that curved like something out of a Gothic novel. Finally, the woman stopped at a door and pushed it open. "Your room." Vera stepped inside and stopped. It was a bedroom, not a cell, not a holding pen, an actual bedroom with a four-poster bed and a reading chair and windows that overlooked gardens she could barely see in the darkness. There was a lock on the door, but on the inside, not the outside. "There's food on the table," the woman said. "You should eat. Mr. Vale said you're not to be disturbed unless you call." She pointed to an intercom on the wall. "Press the button if you need anything." Then she was gone, and Vera was alone. She stood in the middle of the room, dripping onto hardwood floors, her mind unable to process what was happening. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Women who got kidnapped and delivered to crime lords didn't get hot showers and private rooms and food waiting on tables. They got hurt, used, erased. Vera walked to the table on legs that still felt unsteady. Someone had left a tray with soup, bread, water. Her stomach cramped at the sight of it, reminding her she hadn't eaten since yesterday. But the fear was louder than the hunger. Poisoned. It had to be poisoned. Except why would Ronin Vale go through all this trouble just to poison her? If he wanted her dead, there'd been a dozen easier ways. The knife in the foyer, a bullet in the rain, hands around her throat. Vera picked up the spoon. Her hands were still shaking, making the soup slosh. She brought it to her lips, tasted salt and vegetables and warmth that had nothing to do with temperature. Not poisoned, just soup. She ate mechanically, barely tasting it, her eyes fixed on the door, waiting for it to open, for the real nightmare to start. It didn't. Hours passed. The food disappeared. Exhaustion crashed over her in waves, but she fought it, pacing the room, checking the windows, locked, but with curtains she could close, examining every corner for cameras or hidden doors. She found nothing. Just a room. Just furniture. Just the kind of normal that felt like a trap. Finally, when her legs wouldn't hold her anymore, Vera collapsed onto the bed. She told herself she'd just rest her eyes for a minute, just long enough to think clearly. She woke to sunlight. For a disorienting moment, she didn't know where she was. Then it all came crashing back, the rain, the gravel, Ronin Vale's flat eyes watching her like she was a problem to solve. She bolted upright, heart racing, but the room was exactly as she'd left it, empty, quiet. Morning light filtered through the windows, painting everything gold. Vera stumbled to the glass and looked out at gardens that seemed to stretch forever, all manicured hedges and stone paths. Beautiful in a way that felt hostile, like nature beaten into submission. A knock on the door made her jump. "Miss Cade?" The woman's voice, muffled but polite. "Breakfast is ready if you'd like it." Vera's voice came out rusty. "I'm not hungry." A pause. "Mr. Vale asked me to tell you that you're not a prisoner. You can leave your room whenever you want. Or stay in it. Your choice." Your choice. The words felt like a lie, but Vera didn't know what else to do. She was wearing clothes that weren't hers, in a house she didn't know, held by a man whose motives made no sense. She opened the door. The woman smiled, the expression not quite reaching her eyes. "This way." They went downstairs, back through those endless hallways, into a dining room that could have seated 20 but held only one place setting at the far end of a long table. Ronin Vale sat there, reading something on a tablet, a cup of coffee steaming at his elbow. He looked up when Vera entered. "You slept well?" It was such a normal question, delivered in such a normal tone, that Vera's brain short-circuited. She stood in the doorway staring at him, unable to formulate a response. Ronin gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit. Or don't. But if you're going to stand there, at least close your mouth. You look like you're trying to catch flies." The comment was so unexpected, so weirdly human, that Vera almost laughed. Instead, she walked to the chair and sat, more because her legs were shaking again than because she'd made a decision. Food appeared, eggs, toast, fruit she didn't recognize. The woman who'd brought her down poured orange juice and disappeared like smoke. "Eat," Ronin said, going back to his tablet. "Why am I here?" Vera's voice came out stronger than she felt. "Because Gregor dumped you on my doorstep." "That's not what I mean. Why didn't you—" She stopped, unsure how to finish the sentence. "Why didn't you hurt me? Why didn't you kill me? Why am I sitting at your table instead of buried in your garden?" Ronin set down the tablet. "You want to know what I'm going to do with you." It wasn't a question. Vera nodded anyway. "Nothing." He picked up his coffee, took a sip. "You're free to go whenever you want. There's a car that can take you anywhere in the city. I'll have someone provide you with cash and a phone, since I assume Gregor's men took yours." Vera stared at him. "That's it?" "That's it." "Why?" "Because I don't collect people." Ronin's eyes met hers, and she saw that calculation again, that processing happening behind his expression. "And because Gregor made a fundamental error in judgment. He thought throwing you at me would erase his debt. Instead, it bought him an enemy." The words were delivered flatly, like he was discussing the weather. But Vera felt the weight of them, the promise of violence wrapped in calm. "What about me?" she asked. "What if I go to the police?" "And tell them what? That you were kidnapped by men you can't identify and delivered to a house you can't locate?" Ronin raised an eyebrow. "You're welcome to try, but we both know how that conversation ends." He was right. Vera knew it bone deep. She had no proof, no witnesses, nothing but her own word against what? She didn't even know where she was. The ride here had been long and dark and full of turns she couldn't track. "So I just go back to my life?" The idea seemed absurd. "Pretend this didn't happen?" "If that's what you want." Ronin pushed a piece of paper across the table. "Or you can stay." Vera looked at the paper. It was blank. "Stay and do what?" "Whatever you want. Read, sleep, recover." He paused. "You've been through trauma. Walking back into your old life immediately isn't always the wisest choice. There was something in his voice, not quite sympathy, but close to it. Understanding, maybe. Like he'd seen this before, this shell-shocked confusion of people pulled out of one reality and dropped into another. "And if I stay?" Vera said slowly. "What do you get out of it?" Ronin smiled, but there was no warmth in it. The satisfaction of costing Gregor something he thought he could trade. Every day you're alive and well is a reminder that he failed. "I'm a message. Everything's a message in my world, Miss Cade." Vera looked down at the food on her plate, untouched. Her mind was racing through possibilities, trying to find the trap in Ronin's words. Because there had to be a trap. Men like him didn't offer kindness without strings attached, but her apartment was gone. She'd missed rent, probably been evicted by now. Her job at the diner was definitely gone. And everyone she knew in the city was either a casual acquaintance or someone who'd proven they wouldn't miss her when she disappeared. She had nowhere to go. The realization settled over her like a weight. She was untethered, floating, and Ronin Vale was offering her an anchor. A poisoned anchor, probably, but an anchor nonetheless. "How long can I stay?" she asked. "As long as you need." "And you won't—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Ronin's expression hardened. "I won't touch you, neither will anyone in this house. You have my word. The word of a crime lord. The word of a man who keeps his promises." He stood, picking up his tablet. "Think it over. The car will be available whenever you want it." He walked past her toward the door, and Vera twisted in her seat to watch him go. At the threshold, he paused. "One more thing," he said without turning around. "The men who took you, Victor and his crew, are being handled as we speak. They won't bother you again. They won't bother anyone again." Then he was gone, and Vera was alone in the dining room with food going cold and a choice that felt like no choice at all. She stayed. It wasn't a decision so much as an inability to make one. Every time she thought about leaving, about walking out those iron gates and disappearing into the city, her mind conjured images of Victor's friends, of Gregor, whoever he was, deciding she was a loose end, of stepping back into a life that had proven it could be ripped away in seconds. At least here, in this strange mansion with its careful servants and watchful guards, she knew where the danger was. It wore expensive shirts and spoke in quiet tones and looked at her like she was the equation that didn't quite balance. The days developed a rhythm. Vera stayed in her room mostly, emerging for meals she barely touched. The woman who'd helped her that first night, her name was Annika, she learned, brought books and magazines. Never asked questions, never commented on the bruises fading to yellow on Vera's arms or the way she jumped at sudden sounds. The house moved around her like she was invisible. Guards patrolled the hallways but never looked directly at her. Men in suits came and went, their voices low and urgent behind closed doors. Once she heard shouting, a crash, something breaking, but Annika just smiled and said the plumbing was being repaired. Vera didn't believe her, but she didn't ask follow-up questions either. A week passed, then 2. The nightmares started to space out, coming every other night instead of every night. Vera began to venture beyond her room, exploring the parts of the house that weren't off-limits. The library. The gardens, though she never went far from the building. The conservatory with its jungle of plants and humid air that felt like breathing underwater. She never saw Ronin. It should have been a relief. Instead, it felt like waiting for a blade to drop. He was everywhere in the house. In the way servants straightened when his name was mentioned, in the schedules that shifted around his movements, in the empty chair across from her at breakfast that someone always set anyway. "Does he ever eat?" Vera asked Annika one morning. "Mr. Vale takes his meals in his office most days." "Why set a place for him then?" Annika's smile was practiced. "Hope springs eternal, Miss Cade." It was the kind of non-answer that had become routine. Vera stopped asking questions after that. On the 15th day, she broke a tray. It was an accident. She'd been carrying it back to the kitchen herself, trying to be useful, trying to feel less like a ghost haunting someone else's life. Her hands had been steadier lately, but the tray was heavier than she'd expected. It slipped, crashed to the marble floor, sent china fragments skittering across the foyer. Vera froze. For a moment, she was back in foster homes, bracing for the slap that came after mistakes. For the cold rage of adults who saw her as a burden, who took broken dishes as personal insults. Her shoulders hunched, her breath caught, her whole body tensed for impact. "Are you hurt?" The voice came from behind her. Vera spun, her heart hammering. Ronin stood at the base of the stairs dressed in dark slacks and a white shirt, his expression unreadable. He wasn't angry, wasn't cold. He just looked at her, then at the broken china, then back at her. "I'm sorry," Vera said quickly. "I didn't mean to. I'll clean it up. I asked if you were hurt." The question didn't compute. Vera stared at him, her apology dying on her lips. Ronin walked closer, his footsteps careful around the debris. "Did you cut yourself?" "I know." Vera looked down at her hands, half expecting to see blood, but her skin was intact. Shaking, but intact. "Then leave it. Someone will clean it up." "But I broke—" "China," Ronin finished. "Replaceable. Unlike you." He gestured toward the sitting room. "Come with me." It wasn't a request. Vera followed, her legs unsteady, her mind still braced for punishment that wasn't coming. The sitting room was all dark wood and leather chairs, a fireplace that wasn't lit despite the chill in the air. Ronin gestured to a chair and Vera sat, perching on the edge like she might need to run. Ronin didn't sit. He stood by the window, looking out at the gardens, his hands in his pockets. "You've been here 2 weeks," he said. "Yes. And in that time, you've barely left your room, barely eaten, barely spoken to anyone." Vera didn't know what to say to that. It was all true. Ronin turned to face her. "I'm not keeping you prisoner, Vera. If this house feels like a cage, you can leave." "It doesn't feel like a cage." The words came out before she could think them through. "It feels like waiting." "For what?" "For this to make sense." Vera met his eyes, surprising herself with her own boldness. "For you to show me what you really want. For the trap to close." Something flickered across Ronin's face. Not anger, something else. Sadness, maybe, or recognition. "There is no trap," he said quietly. "Everyone wants something." "True." Ronin walked to the chair across from her and sat, his movements deliberate. "I want Gregor to know that his apology failed. I want the people who think they can trade human lives to understand that there are lines. I want this city to remember that power without principle is just brutality." He paused. "What I don't want is for you to live in fear in a house that's supposed to be a refuge." Vera laughed, the sound bitter. "A refuge. Right. You don't believe me. I don't understand you." The honesty felt dangerous, but Vera was tired of pretending. "You're Ronin Vale. You disappear people. You own judges and cops and half the businesses in this city. But you give me a room and food and—" She gestured helplessly. "Why? What's the point?" Ronin was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was lower, rougher. "Because I can. Because in a world built on cruelty, choosing otherwise is the only power worth having." "That's not an answer. It's the only one I have." They sat in silence. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked away seconds. Somewhere in the house, a door closed. Vera's mind worked through Ronin's words, trying to find the lie in them, the angle. But his face showed nothing, just that same flat calm, like he'd stated a fact about the weather. "What happened to Victor?" Vera asked suddenly. "You said he was being handled." "He was." "Meaning?" Ronin's eyes met hers. "Meaning he won't deliver any more human packages to anyone." The implication hung in the air. Vera should have been horrified, should have recoiled from the casual admission of violence. Instead, she felt a dark curl of satisfaction in her chest, Victor's hands on her arms, his laughter when she'd struggled, the way he'd talked about her like she was meat. "Good," she said. Ronin's eyebrow lifted slightly. "Good?" He deserved it. Vera's hands were shaking again, but not from fear, from anger that had been buried under terror for weeks. They all did. They grabbed me off the street like I was nothing, like I was— "I know," Ronin said quietly, "and they've been dealt with." "All of them?" "All of them." The satisfaction bloomed larger. Vera should have felt guilty about it, should have been concerned about her own moral compass. But she just felt lighter, like a weight she hadn't named had been lifted. "Thank you," she said. Ronin stood. "Don't thank me for doing the bare minimum of human decency. Thank yourself for surviving." He walked toward the door, and Vera watched him go, this man who made no sense. This crime lord who spoke about principle. This predator who somehow wasn't. Mr. Vale? He stopped. Is it true? What they say about you? Ronin turned slightly, not quite looking at her. That depends on what they say. That you run everything, that you could have someone killed with a phone call, that the police are too scared to even say your name. All true. No hesitation, no apology. Then why didn't you kill me? The question that had been burning in her chest since that first night finally escaped. When I said I'd heard the stories, when I basically called you a monster, you could have just ended it. Why didn't you? Ronin was quiet so long Vera thought he might not answer. Then, because monsters don't get to choose what they are. I do. He left before she could respond, and Vera sat alone in the sitting room with those words echoing in her head. She thought about the men who'd grabbed her, who'd seen her as disposable. Thought about the life she'd built that had crumbled so easily. Thought about Ronin Vale offering her safety with one hand while wielding violence with the other. The world wasn't what she'd thought it was. Maybe it never had been. That night, for the first time since arriving, Vera came down to dinner without being called. She took the seat across from Ronin's empty place setting and ate slowly, tasting the food properly. When Annika came to clear the plates, Vera asked for seconds. Progress. Small and fragile, but real. The next morning, she woke to shouting. Not in the house. Outside, beyond the walls. Male voices raised in argument, the sound of car doors slamming. Vera went to her window and looked down at the driveway visible through the gates. 3 black cars. Men in expensive suits surrounding someone she couldn't quite see. One of them was gesturing wildly, his face red even from this distance. Vera's stomach tightened. This looked like the kind of confrontation that ended in blood. She should have stayed in her room, should have closed the curtains and pretended she'd seen nothing. Instead, she found herself running downstairs, through the hallways she'd memorized, toward the front door. Guards tried to stop her. Miss Cade, you shouldn't... But she pushed past them, out into morning air that smelled like rain and exhaust, just as Ronin emerged from the house. He didn't look surprised to see her, just gave her a single glance that said stay back before turning his attention to the men at the gates. Nikolai, he said, his voice carrying across the courtyard. I don't recall inviting you. The man who'd been gesturing, Nikolai apparently, stepped forward. He was older than Ronin, maybe 60, with silver hair and a face like granite. We need to talk. Then call my office and make an appointment. This can't wait. Ronin's expression didn't change. Everything can wait, Nikolai. That's what patience is. Not this. Nikolai's eyes cut to Vera, who stood frozen on the portico, and something ugly crossed his face. I see you've acquired new tastes. The air went cold. Vera didn't understand what was happening, but she felt it. The shift in energy, the way Ronin's guards subtly moved positions, the way the men behind Nikolai tensed like they expected violence. Ronin took 3 steps forward. Nothing dramatic, just a slow, measured movement that somehow screamed threat. Choose your next words very carefully, he said softly. Nikolai held his ground, but Vera saw the calculation in his eyes, the reassessment. I'm just saying that keeping her here sends a message. People are talking. Let them talk. They're saying you've gone soft, that Gregor's little gift broke you. Gregor's gift, Ronin said, his voice dropping to something that barely qualified as speech, was an insult that cost him everything he'd built. If you'd like to join him in bankruptcy and exile, keep talking. The threat landed. Nikolai's jaw worked, but he stepped back. This isn't over, he said. Yes, Ronin replied. It is. The men climbed back into their cars. Engines roared. They disappeared through the gates in a spray of gravel. Ronin stood there for a moment, watching them go. Then he turned and saw Vera still standing on the portico, her arms wrapped around herself against the morning chill. You shouldn't have come out here, he said. I heard shouting. I thought... You thought what? That you could help? There was an edge to his voice now, the first real anger she'd heard from him. This isn't your fight. Then what is it? Ronin looked at her, and Vera saw something in his face she hadn't seen before. Exhaustion. The kind that came from holding up weight for too long. It's the cost of refusing to play by rules I don't believe in, he said. and it's about to get worse. Before Vera could ask what he meant, he was walking past her into the house, his shoulders tight with tension. The guards dispersed. The courtyard emptied, and Vera stood alone, wondering what storm was coming and why she couldn't make herself run from it. Inside, she found Ronin in his office, a room she'd never been allowed to enter before, all dark wood and maps and screens showing security feeds. He was pouring amber liquid into a glass, his movements sharp. "I told you this wasn't your fight," he said without turning around. "And I told you I don't understand you." Vera stepped into the office, her heart pounding. What did Nikolai mean? About you going soft? Exactly what he said. Ronin drank, set down the glass with a sharp click. "I've been making changes, shutting down operations that don't meet certain standards, refusing deals that involve human trafficking, cutting off revenue streams that profit from suffering." He turned to face her. "Apparently that makes me weak." "Standards," Vera repeated. "You're a crime lord with standards." "Everyone has standards, Vera. Most people just don't enforce them." "And what are yours?" Ronin was quiet for a moment. Then, "No children, no non-consensual anything, no using people as currency, no cruelty that serves no purpose." He paused. "I know how that sounds coming from me, but I didn't choose this life because I enjoy suffering. I chose it because the alternative was being prey." The honesty in his voice caught Vera off guard. She'd expected deflection, maybe anger at her questions, not this raw admission. "And now?" she asked. "What happens now that Nikolai and whoever else think you're weak?" "Now they test the theory." Ronin's expression hardened. "They'll push boundaries, challenge my authority, see if I'll fold." "Will you?" "No." The word was flat, final. And looking at Ronin's face, at the steel beneath the calm, Vera believed him. "That's why I can't leave," she said suddenly, understanding clicking into place. "If I run now, it proves them right. It proves I was just a thing you took and got bored with." "You're not a thing," Ronin's voice sharpened. "And you can leave whenever—" "I know I can," Vera interrupted. "But I'm not going to. Not yet." They looked at each other across the office, two people caught in a current neither had chosen. Vera saw the moment Ronin understood, that she wasn't staying out of fear, but out of something else. Spite, maybe. Or stubbornness. Or the simple fact that running from one trap just to land in another seemed pointless. "This is going to get messy," he warned. "It's already messy." "Messier," Vera lifted her chin. "Then I guess we'll see what happens." Ronin studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded, a small acknowledgement that felt like a turning point. "Stay out of the office wing," he said. "And if anyone you don't recognize shows up, find me or one of the guards immediately." "Why? What are you expecting?" But Ronin just picked up his glass again and turned to look at the security feeds, dismissing her without another word. Vera left the office with more questions than answers, and a growing certainty that the choice she'd just made was either the bravest or the stupidest thing she'd ever done. The week that followed proved Ronin right. Men came and went at all hours. Vera heard raised voices behind closed doors. Once, she woke in the middle of the night to the sound of breaking glass somewhere below, followed by Ronin's voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. By morning, the mess was gone, and nobody mentioned it. The guards multiplied. New faces appeared in the hallways, hard-eyed men who nodded at Vera but never spoke. She learned to navigate around them, to read the tension in their shoulders as a barometer for how bad things were getting. And things were getting bad. She saw it in Ronin's face at the few meals they shared, saw it in the way his phone rang constantly, in the meetings that went until dawn, in the lines appearing at the corners of his eyes. "You should eat more," Vera said one morning, watching him push food around his plate. Ronin looked up, surprised. "I'm fine." "You look like hell." A ghost of a smile. "Honesty. I'm not used to that." "Get used to it." Vera surprised herself with the boldness. "Someone needs to tell you when you're running yourself into the ground. And you've appointed yourself to that position?" "Someone has to." They fell into silence, but it felt different than before. Less like two strangers forced into proximity, and more like, what? Allies? The word felt too strong, but Vera couldn't think of a better one. "The city's changing," Ronin said abruptly. "The old families are fracturing. New players are moving in. Everyone's looking for weakness to exploit. And they see me as your weakness. They see anything that makes me human as weakness. He met her eyes. That's the world I live in, Vera. That's why I'm asking you one last time. Are you sure you want to stay? Vera thought about it. Really thought about it. About the life she'd lost and the one she couldn't quite see yet. About the man across from her who'd shown her more decency in 3 weeks than most people had in her entire life. About the fact that leaving now felt like betraying something she couldn't name. I'm sure, she said. Ronin nodded slowly. Then there's something I need to tell you. Something that's going to happen soon, and I need you to be prepared for it. Vera's stomach tightened. What? But before Ronin could answer, the dining room door burst open. A guard, one of the new ones, stood there, his face pale. Sir, we have a problem. Ronin was on his feet instantly. What kind of problem? Nikolai's people. They're at the south gate, and they're not alone. The look that crossed Ronin's face made Vera's blood run cold. Not fear exactly, but recognition of something bad enough to worry a man who didn't seem to worry about anything. He turned to Vera. Go to your room, lock the door. Don't come out until I come get you. What's happening? Vera, please. The raw urgency in it got her moving. She ran from the dining room, up the stairs, her heart hammering. Behind her, she heard Ronin giving orders, his voice sharp and commanding. She reached her room and locked the door like he'd said. Then she went to the window and looked down at the south gate. What she saw made her breath stop. Not just cars this time, dozens of them, men pouring out, armed with things Vera couldn't identify from this distance but knew were weapons. And at the center of it all, Nikolai, standing with his arms crossed like he owned the place. This wasn't a visit, this was a siege. And Vera, locked in her room with no weapon and no plan, could do nothing but watch as Ronin Vale walked out to meet them, one man against an army, with the kind of calm that said he'd been expecting this all along. Vera's hands were pressed flat against the window glass, her breath fogging it in rapid bursts. From her second-floor vantage point, she could see everything. The line of black vehicles choking the south gate, the men fanning out in formation like they'd done this before, Ronin walking toward them with his hands visible at his sides, weaponless. Stupid. He was being stupid. Her fingers curled against the glass hard enough to hurt. She should stay here. He'd told her to stay here. Lock the door, don't come out, wait for him. Simple instructions from a man who clearly knew what he was doing. Except he was walking into what looked like an execution, and Vera's gut, the same gut that had kept her alive through foster homes and street corners, and men who smiled with their mouths but not their eyes, was screaming that this was wrong. She turned from the window and stared at the locked door. Her door. Her choice. Fuck it. Vera unlocked the door and ran. The hallway was empty. Everyone had moved toward the confrontation, leaving the upper floors deserted. She took the stairs 2 at a time, her socked feet silent on the marble, her heart trying to punch through her ribcage. At the bottom, she could hear voices, Ronin's guards arguing in clipped tones about positions and sightlines and whether they should be weapons hot. Vera slipped past them, using the chaos as cover, and headed for the conservatory. It had a side door that opened onto the gardens, and the gardens had paths that led to the south gate. She'd mapped it all during her walks, more out of habit than plan. Always know the exits. Always have a way out. The conservatory was humid and green and empty. Vera pushed through hanging vines, past orchids that looked alien in the dim light, to the door she needed. Locked. Of course it was locked. She grabbed a clay pot from a nearby shelf, something heavy with a half-dead fern in it, and smashed it against the door handle. The pot shattered. The handle bent but didn't break. Vera swore, grabbed another pot, hit it harder. Metal shrieked. The handle gave. Cold air rushed in as she shoved the door open. The garden stretched before her, all geometric hedges and gravel paths. In the distance, she could hear Nikolai's voice, amplified somehow, echoing off the estate walls. And this peacefully, Vale, but you're making that difficult. Vera ran toward the sound, keeping low behind the hedges. Her feet hit gravel, and she winced at the crunch, but nobody shouted. Nobody noticed. All eyes were forward, on the confrontation happening at the gate. She reached the edge of the formal gardens where they met the driveway and dropped behind a stone planter. From here, she could see everything. Ronin stood 20 feet from the gate, alone. His guards had fanned out behind him, weapons drawn but pointed at the ground. Smart positioning, They had cover from the estate's pillars and walls, while Nikolai's men were exposed in the driveway. But numbers mattered. Ronin had maybe a dozen guards visible. Nikolai had brought 40, 50 men, maybe more. And they weren't just standing around looking tough. They had rifles, shotguns, things Vera couldn't identify, but knew were designed to kill efficiently. "You've made your point," Ronin said. His voice carried clear and cold across the space. "Now get off my property before this becomes something you regret." Nikolai laughed. He stood at the gate, his hands resting on the iron bars like he was considering climbing over. "Your property." Listen to him. Still pretending he owns this city. "I own enough of it. You used to." Nikolai's smile was all teeth. "But then you started getting principles, started turning down profitable ventures because they didn't meet your delicate moral standards, started keeping pets." His eyes cut toward the house, and Vera knew he was thinking about her. "Men are talking, Ronin, saying you've lost your edge, that you're more interested in playing savior than running an empire. Let them talk." "I did. For weeks I listened to them talk, and you know what I realized?" Nikolai leaned closer to the gate. "They're right. You have gone soft, and soft men don't survive in our world." Ronin's expression didn't change. "Is that what this is? An intervention? You brought an army to my door because you're concerned about my business practices?" "I brought an army because I'm done watching you tear down everything we built." Nikolai's voice hardened. "The old families kept this city running. We had rules, systems, balance, and you're destroying it because some girl made you feel things." "Her name is Vera." Ronin's voice dropped to something dangerous. "And she has nothing to do with this." "Everything to do with it." Nikolai gestured broadly. "You think I don't know what Gregor tried to do? He offered you a gift and you threw it back in his face, bankrupted him, sent him running to Kiev with his tail between his legs, all because you decided women aren't currency anymore." "They never were." "Bullshit. Everything's currency. Money, power, bodies. It's all the same. It's all leverage, and you pretending otherwise doesn't make you righteous. It makes you weak." Vera's hands were shaking. She gripped the stone planter harder, her knuckles going white. Every word out of Nikolai's mouth felt like a slap. This was about her. All of this, the siege, the guns, the tension that felt like a drawn bowstring, was because Ronin had chosen not to hurt her. She wanted to scream, wanted to stand up and tell Nikolai to go to hell, that she wasn't a gift or currency or leverage. But her voice was locked in her throat. And even if it wasn't, she knew what a woman's voice would do to this situation, make it worse. Prove Nikolai's point that she was a distraction, a weakness, so she stayed silent and hated herself for it. "Here's what's going to happen," Nikolai said. "You're going to step back from the council. Let the rest of us make decisions about how this city runs. You can keep your little estate, play house with your rescue project, pretend you're better than us, but you don't get a vote anymore." "No." The word dropped like a stone. Nikolai's smile faded. "No? You heard me." Ronin took a step forward, just one, but every guard on both sides tensed. "I'm not stepping back. I'm not letting you and the others turn this city into a hunting ground. And I'm definitely not taking orders from a man who thinks power means the freedom to brutalize anyone weaker." "You self-righteous son of a bitch!" Nikolai's face flushed red. "You think you're some kind of hero? You've killed more people than I can count. You've destroyed lives, ruined families, burned everything that got in your way. And now you want to lecture me about morality?" "I never claimed to be a hero." Ronin's voice stayed level. "I claim to have standards. There's a difference. Your standards are going to get you killed. Maybe, but at least I'll die as something other than a parasite." The silence that followed was deafening. Vera watched Nikolai's face cycle through emotions, shock, rage, something that looked almost like hurt. Then it all crystallized into cold fury. "Open the gate," Nikolai said to his men. "Sir, if we—" "I said open it." Two of Nikolai's men moved forward with bolt cutters. Ronin's guards raised their weapons. The sound of safeties clicking off echoed across the driveway. "Last chance," Ronin said quietly. "For you," Nikolai shot back. The bolt cutters bit into the chain securing the gate. Metal shrieked. Vera's heart hammered so hard she thought her ribs might crack. This was it. Shots were about to be fired and people were about to die, and it was all because Ronin had chosen to treat her like a person instead of a thing. She couldn't let that happen. Vera stood up. Stop. Her voice wasn't loud, but in the tension of the moment, it carried. Every head turned toward her. Ronin's expression went from calm to furious in half a second. Vera, get back inside. No. She walked forward, her legs shaking but holding, past the hedges, onto the driveway, into the open space between Ronin and Nikolai's small army. This is about me, so I get a say. You don't, Nikolai said flatly. This is business. I'm the business. Vera forced herself to meet his eyes. You said it yourself. Ronin bankrupted Gregor because of me. He's refusing to step down because of me. So let's stop pretending I'm not standing right here. Ronin moved toward her, his face tight with something between anger and fear. Get back inside. Vera held her ground. What happens if I leave? Right now? What happens if I walk out that gate and disappear? Vera, answer the question. She looked at Ronin, then at Nikolai. Does this end? If I'm not here, do you all go back to your rules and systems and balance? Nikolai's smile returned sharp and mean. See? She understands she's the problem. She's not the problem, Ronin said through gritted teeth. Your worldview is the problem. But I could be the solution. Vera's voice shook but didn't break. I could leave, go somewhere far away, and then nobody has to die today. No. Ronin's voice cracked like a whip. That's not happening. Why not? Vera turned to face him fully. You said I could leave whenever I wanted. You said I wasn't a prisoner, so let me go. This isn't about you leaving by choice, and you know it. Ronin's eyes were blazing now, all that careful control burning away. This is about you sacrificing yourself to solve a problem that isn't yours, and I won't allow it. You don't get to decide what I do. The hell I don't. Not when you're standing in a kill zone making yourself a target. They stared at each other, the air between them crackling with tension. Behind them, Nikolai laughed. This is perfect, he said. The great Ronin Vale, undone by a woman who doesn't know her place. Ronin's hand shot out and grabbed Vera's arm. Not hard, but firm enough to pull her back toward the house. She resisted. Let go. Not a chance. Ronin, I said no. His grip tightened. You want to help? Go inside, lock the door, let me handle this. By getting yourself killed? If that's what it takes. The admission hit Vera like cold water. She looked at Ronin's face, at the grim acceptance there, the readiness to die for whatever principle he'd decided was worth defending. And something inside her snapped. You stupid, stubborn bastard, she hissed. You think dying here makes you noble? It just makes you dead. Better dead than compromised. Better alive and fighting. Vera jerked her arm free. You want to change the city? You want to prove that power doesn't have to mean cruelty? You can't do that as a corpse. And I can't do it by backing down. They were inches apart now, both breathing hard, both too angry to think straight. Around them, guards shifted nervously. Nikolai watched with obvious amusement. This is fascinating, he called out. But we're on a schedule, so here's the deal. Girl leaves, Ronin steps down, everyone leaves. Or girl stays, Ronin refuses, and we paint this pretty driveway red. Your choice. Third option, Ronin said without looking away from Vera. You leave. Now. And I forget this insult happened. Not going to happen. Then we have a problem. The bolt cutters bit through the last link. The chain fell away with a crash. The gate swung open, and Nikolai's men poured through. Ronin's guards opened fire. The sound was deafening, cracks and booms that echoed off the estate walls, bullets whining through air. Vera screamed and dropped, her hands over her head. Ronin grabbed her, dragged her behind one of the stone pillars flanking the driveway. His body covered hers, heavy and solid, while chaos erupted around them. Stay down, he shouted over the gunfire. Vera couldn't have moved if she'd wanted to. Her whole body was locked up, frozen, her mind replaying the past 30 seconds on a loop. The gates opening, the shooting starting, Ronin pulling her to safety while bullets chewed up the gravel where she'd been standing. She was going to die here. They were both going to die here. A body hit the pillar above them, spraying concrete chips. Ronin cursed and shifted, putting himself between Vera and the direction of fire. His hand found a gun. Where had he been carrying it? And he leaned out, squeezed off 3 shots, ducked back. "How many?" someone shouted. One of the guards. "Too many," Ronin shouted back. "Fall back to the house. Controlled retreat." The gunfire intensified. Vera pressed herself against the pillar, making herself as small as possible. Her ears were ringing. She could smell gunpowder and something else. Copper, she realized distantly. Blood. "Can you run?" Ronin asked, his face close to hers. "I don't know." "You're going to have to." He grabbed her hand. "When I say go, you run for the conservatory door. Don't stop. Don't look back. Understand?" Vera nodded, not trusting her voice. "Go!" They ran. Vera's legs pumped mechanically, her hand locked in Ronin's grip. Behind them, guns roared. Something tugged at her sleeve. A bullet passing so close she felt the air displacement. She stumbled, nearly went down, but Ronin hauled her forward with strength that seemed impossible. The conservatory door gaped ahead. 20 feet? 10? 5. They crashed through it together, tumbling into humid air and greenery. Ronin kicked the door shut and shoved a heavy planter against it. Outside, the gunfire continued, punctuated by screams. Vera's breath came in ragged gasps. She was shaking so hard her teeth chattered. Ronin pulled her deeper into the conservatory, into shadows behind a stand of bamboo. "Are you hit?" he demanded, his hands running over her arms, her shoulders, checking for blood. "No, I don't think so. Are you?" "I'm fine." But his shirt was torn at the shoulder, and when he moved, Vera saw red. Not a graze, an actual wound. "You're bleeding." "It's nothing. It's not nothing. You're... Vera." Ronin gripped her shoulders, forcing her to look at him. "I need you to focus. Can you do that?" She nodded, even though focusing felt impossible, with her heart trying to explode, and her ears still ringing, and the smell of blood mixing with orchid blooms. "There's a tunnel," Ronin said, "under the house. Built during Prohibition. It comes out about a mile from here in the old industrial district." "A tunnel. I need you to use it. Get out of here. There's a car at the exit point. Keys in the visor. Drive to..." He rattled off an address Vera's brain couldn't hold. "Tell them I sent you. They'll keep you safe until this is over." "What about you?" "I'll handle Nikolai." "By yourself? Against 50 men?" "I've survived worse odds." "That's not an answer." Ronin's jaw tightened. "It's the only one you're getting. Now go." "No." "Vera." "I said no." She pulled away from him, her fear crystallizing into something harder. "You don't get to save me and then die. That's not how this works. This isn't a negotiation. You're damn right it's not, because I'm not leaving." They glared at each other, and Vera saw the moment Ronin realized she meant it, that she'd dig her heels in and refuse to move, and he didn't have time to force her. "You're going to get yourself killed," he said, his voice rough. "Then we'll die together." The words hung between them, too big and too honest. Ronin's expression shifted, something Vera couldn't name flickering across his face before the mask slammed back down. "Fine," he said, "but you stay behind me. You do exactly what I say. And if I tell you to run, you run. Deal." "Deal." "You're a terrible liar." But there was something almost like fondness in his voice. Or maybe respect. They moved through the conservatory toward the main house. The gunfire had stopped, either because people had run out of bullets or run out of targets. Vera couldn't hear screaming anymore. That felt worse somehow. Silence meant decisions had been made, and not the good kind. Ronin cracked open the door to the main hallway and peered out. Vera watched his face, trying to read what he was seeing. His expression went carefully blank. "How bad?" she whispered. "Bad enough." He pulled her into the hallway. Bodies lay crumpled against walls, some in guard uniforms, some in the dark suits Nikolai's men wore. The marble floor was slick with blood. Vera's stomach heaved, but she swallowed hard and kept moving. They passed the dining room where she'd eaten breakfast a few hours ago. One of the windows was shattered, glass glittering on the table like diamonds. In the foyer, the chandelier had come down, lying in a twisted heap of crystal and metal. "Where is everyone?" Vera asked. "Either dead, hiding, or still fighting." Ronin's voice was flat, clinical. The voice of a man who'd compartmentalized everything human to focus on survival. "Nikolai will be looking for me." He needs to finish this publicly, or it doesn't mean anything. So you're going to give him what he wants? I'm going to give him a conversation. Ronin checked his gun, frowned, ejected the magazine. 2 bullets left. Perfect. That's not enough. It's enough for what I need to do. Before Vera could ask what that meant, voices echoed from somewhere above them. Male voices, speaking Russian. Ronin grabbed Vera and pulled her into a side room, a library, leather chairs, and walls of books, and closed the door quietly. They pressed against the wall, barely breathing. Footsteps passed in the hallway. Paused. Vera's heart hammered. If the door opened, if they were found, the footsteps moved on, faded, disappeared. Ronin let out a breath. They're searching room by room. We don't have much time. Time for what? He didn't answer. Just crossed to the far wall and ran his hand along one of the bookshelves. Something clicked. The shelf swung outward, revealing darkness beyond. The tunnel? Vera guessed. One of them. This one leads to my office. Ronin gestured for her to follow. Stay close. They descended narrow stairs into blackness. Ronin pulled out his phone, used the light to illuminate stone walls that looked old enough to be historical. The air smelled like earth and mildew and something else Vera couldn't identify. At the bottom, another door. Ronin opened it carefully, gun raised. Beyond was his office, looking exactly as Vera remembered except for the man standing at the desk rifling through papers. Victor. No, not Victor. Someone who looked like him. Younger, maybe, with the same brutal features and dead eyes. He looked up as the door opened, his hand going for the gun at his belt. Ronin shot him. The sound was impossibly loud in the confined space. The man dropped, clutching his leg, screaming. Ronin crossed the room in 3 strides and kicked the gun away. Where's Nikolai? He asked calmly. The man spat blood and Russian curses. Ronin's boot connected with the bullet wound. The man's scream went up an octave. Where is Nikolai? Fuck you. Wrong answer. Ronin knelt, putting his weight on the injured leg. The man thrashed, begging in Russian. Last chance. Conference room, the man gasped. East wing, waiting for you. How many? 10, maybe 12. Ronin stood, looked at Vera, who'd pressed herself against the wall, her hand over her mouth. You okay? She nodded, not trusting her voice. The casual violence of it, the way Ronin had shot and tortured information out of someone without hesitation, should have terrified her. And it did. But it also felt inevitable. This was who he was when the mask came off. This was the man who'd survived in a world that ate the weak. Tie him up, Ronin said, gesturing to the curtain cord. Gag him, then we move. Vera's hand shook as she pulled down the cord and approached the bleeding man. He looked at her with hatred that felt like a physical thing. She tied his hands anyway, then his feet, then wadded up his own jacket and shoved it in his mouth. Tighter on the gag, Ronin said. You don't want him getting it out. Vera pulled the fabric tighter, ignoring the man's muffled protests. When she was done, Ronin checked her work, nodded approval, and headed for the office door. The hallway outside was empty. They moved quickly, Ronin leading with his gun raised, Vera following close enough to feel the heat coming off him. Her whole body was running on adrenaline, her mind sharp and terrible. The east wing was across the main foyer. They'd have to cross open ground, exposed, with no cover. Ronin paused at the edge of the hallway, assessing. When we move fast, he said quietly. Don't stop for anything. What if someone shoots? Then I shoot back. You keep running. Ronin, it's not up for debate. He glanced at her, and for just a second, the mask cracked. She saw exhaustion there. And something else. Fear, maybe. Not for himself. If something happens to me, the tunnel entrance is in the wine cellar. Bookshelf on the north wall, 3rd shelf from the bottom, push the red leather book spine. It opens. The tunnel takes you to the industrial district. Car's a gray sedan, keys in the visor. Drive to the address I gave you. I don't remember the address. Ronin pulled out his phone, typed quickly, and held it so she could see. Vera memorized it, a street name and number that meant nothing to her but might mean survival later. Got it? She nodded. Good. Ready? No. She wasn't ready, would never be ready for any of this, but Vera took a deep breath and nodded anyway. They ran. The foyer was a war zone. Overturned furniture, bullet holes poking the walls, that massive chandelier still lying where it had fallen. Their footsteps echoed despite Ronin's attempts at stealth. Halfway across, a door opened and two of Nikolai's men emerged. Ronin fired without breaking stride. His first shot went wide. The second caught one man in the shoulder, spinning him around. The other man raised his gun and Vera screamed a warning. Ronin was already moving, tackling her sideways behind the chandelier wreckage. Bullets pinged off crystal and metal. The wounded man was shouting for backup. "Go!" Ronin said, shoving Vera toward the east wing. "I'll hold them." "You have no bullets left. I'll improvise. Go!" Vera went. Not because she wanted to, but because staying would just make her a liability. She sprinted for the east wing while behind her, Ronin did something that made one of the men scream. She didn't look back. Couldn't look back. The conference room doors loomed ahead, heavy oak with frosted glass panels. Vera could see shapes moving inside, multiple people, shadows shifting. She pressed herself against the wall beside the door and tried to catch her breath. What was she doing? She had no weapon, no plan, no idea how to fight trained killers. She should run, use that tunnel, get to the car, disappear like Ronin had told her. But if she ran, he'd die. She knew that with bone-deep certainty. Whatever play he was planning, whatever conversation he thought he could have with Nikolai, it wouldn't work. Not against those odds. Not when the other man had already decided that Ronin needed to die. The conference room door opened. Vera froze. A man emerged, one of Nikolai's guards, looking down at his phone. He took 2 steps before noticing her. His eyes went wide. Vera moved without thinking. She grabbed the heavy brass lamp from the hall table and swung it like a baseball bat. It connected with the side of his head with a sound like a melon cracking. The man dropped. She stared at the unconscious body, at the lamp still in her hands, at the blood starting to pool on the marble. She just knocked someone out. Maybe killed them. The lamp clattered from her numb fingers. "Well," Nikolai's voice came from inside the conference room. "That's unexpected. Bring her in." Hands grabbed Vera from behind. She struggled, but whoever had her was strong and knew how to restrain someone. She was dragged into the conference room, the door slamming shut behind her. The room was full of men, Nikolai at the head of the table, flanked by guards who looked like they crushed bones for exercise. All of them stared at Vera like she was an interesting specimen. "The rescue project," Nikolai said, smiling that terrible smile. "I was wondering when you'd turn up. Where's your keeper?" Vera didn't answer, couldn't answer. Her throat had closed up. "Shy? That's all right. You don't need to talk." Nikolai gestured, and the hands holding her forced her into a chair. "You just need to sit there and look vulnerable. Ronin will come for you. He won't be able to help himself." "He's not coming," Vera managed. "Of course he is. That's the problem. He cares. And caring is weakness." Nikolai leaned forward. "Do you know how many men I've killed who cared about the wrong things? The wrong people? Dozens. Maybe hundreds. They all thought they were being noble. They all died just the same." The door exploded inward. Not burst. Exploded. Wood splintering, hinges shrieking, the whole thing coming apart in a shower of splinters. Ronin stood in the wreckage, holding something that looked like a combat shotgun he'd gotten from somewhere, his face splattered with blood that probably wasn't his. "Let her go," he said quietly. The room erupted. Guards drew weapons. Nikolai shouted orders. Someone grabbed Vera and hauled her up, using her as a shield. A gun pressed against her temple, cold and hard. Ronin's eyes found hers across the chaos. She saw the calculation happening. How many men? What angles? Where the threats were. His shotgun tracked toward Nikolai. "You shoot me. She dies," Nikolai said. "You know that. And if she dies, you die." Ronin's voice was dead calm. "You know that too." "Stalemate then." "Not quite." Ronin's smile was terrible. "Because I know something you don't." "What's that?" "She's not my weakness. She's yours." Nikolai frowned. "Explain." "You brought 50 men to kill one person. You orchestrated this whole siege because I refused to treat one woman like garbage. You're standing in my house, holding a gun to her head, thinking you've won." Ronin's smile widened. "But you've already lost." "How do you figure?" "Because every moment you keep her alive proves my point. Ronin lowered the shotgun slightly. If she was just currency, just leverage, you'd have killed her already. Made it hurt. Made it public. Proved that carrying is fatal, but you haven't. You're using her as a shield instead, which means you're still trying to manipulate me, still trying to get me to back down, which means you're not sure you can actually win. Silence. Vera felt the gun against her head waver slightly. Nikolai's face had gone pale. You arrogant son of a... I'm not arrogant. I'm right. Ronin set the shotgun down. You want me to step back? Fine. I'll step back. From everything. I'll dismantle my whole operation, liquidate my assets, disappear. And when I'm gone, you'll have what you wanted. Total control. Ronin, don't... Vera started, but the gun pressed harder. But here's what you'll actually have, Ronin continued like she hadn't spoken. You'll have proven that the only way to beat me was to threaten to kill an unarmed woman. Every person in this city who's ever looked to me for protection, everyone who thought there was an alternative to predators like you, they'll know you couldn't win on merit. You had to use her, and they'll remember that. Nikolai's jaw worked. You think I care about optics? I think you care about power. Real power. The kind that doesn't require constant enforcement. Ronin took a step forward, then another, his hands spread. Kill me if you want, but let her walk out of here first. Prove you can win without hiding behind hostages. This is a trick. It's not. I'm unarmed. You have a dozen guns pointed at me. What trick could I possibly be running? The room held its breath. Vera felt the man holding her shift his weight, uncertain. Nikolai stared at Ronin like he was trying to solve an equation that didn't add up. Let her go, Nikolai said finally. The gun left Vera's head. Hands released her. She stumbled forward, and Ronin caught her, steadied her. Go to the tunnel, he murmured. Not without you. Vera. She turned to face Nikolai and his men, putting herself between them and Ronin. You want to shoot someone? Shoot me. Prove how powerful you are by killing an unarmed woman. Get out of the way, Nikolai said. No. Vera, move, Ronin said behind her. No. She looked at Nikolai, at the guards, at all the guns pointed in her general direction. You know what I think? I think Ronin's right. You can't win this. Not really, because even if you kill us both, the story gets out. The crime lord who needed 50 men to kill 2 unarmed people. That's your legacy. Nobody will know. Everyone will know. Vera's voice was shaking but determined. Because stories like this, they spread. They echo. And every time someone tells it, you look weaker. Nikolai's hand moved to his own gun. You really want to die for him? I don't want to die at all, but I'm not running anymore either. The words felt true in a way nothing else had for weeks. Vera had spent her whole life running, from foster homes, from bad situations, from people who wanted to use her. And where had it gotten her? Here, in a war zone. Staring down the barrel of violence she couldn't escape. So she stopped trying to escape. Shoot if you're going to, she said, or don't, but I'm not moving. The seconds stretched. Someone's phone rang, an absurdly normal sound in the tension. It went to voicemail. Then Nikolai started laughing. It wasn't a pleasant sound, more like something breaking. He laughed until he had to lean against the table, until his guards exchanged nervous glances, until the sound died in his throat and left only bitter silence. You beautiful, stupid girl, he said finally. You really think this is how it works? You stand up to the monster and he backs down? I think, Vera said carefully, that you're afraid. Of what? Of being wrong. She took a step forward. Ronin tried to pull her back, but she shook him off. You've built your whole life on the idea that power means doing whatever you want to, whoever you want. And here's Ronin saying that's not true, saying there's another way. And if he's right, she let the implication hang. Then everything you have done, everyone you've hurt, all the cruelty you've justified, it was all just brutality. Not strength, not power. Just you being a sadistic bastard who enjoyed it. The room went deathly quiet. Nikolai's face had gone from red to white to something beyond color. When he spoke, his voice was barely human. Kill them both. The guards raised their guns. Ronin moved, pulling Vera down and back as the first shots rang out. But the shots weren't aimed at them. They were wild, panicked, because the conference room windows had just shattered inward and armed figures were pouring through. Not Nikolai's men. Different uniforms, body armor, tactical gear, police, federal agents, something. "Nobody move," someone shouted. "FBI, weapons down now." Chaos. Absolute chaos. Nikolai's men tried to fight, tried to run, got tackled and zip-tied and dragged to the floor. Ronin kept Vera pinned beneath him, shielding her from the crossfire that thankfully never came because Nikolai's guards weren't quite stupid enough to shoot at federal agents. In under 2 minutes, it was over. Vera lay on the floor, her ears ringing, trying to process what had just happened. Above her, Ronin was being pulled to his feet, being restrained. She tried to protest, but her own arms were being secured behind her. "Wait, she's not—" Ronin started. "Everyone gets processed," an agent cut him off. "No exceptions." Vera was hauled upright and marched out of the conference room with Ronin ahead of her and a dozen other prisoners behind. The estate was swarming with agents now. She could see them through doorways, clearing rooms, photographing evidence, bagging weapons. Outside, the driveway looked like a movie set. Police cars, FBI vans, ambulances, bodies being loaded onto gurneys, some moving, some not. News helicopters circling overhead like vultures. Vera was put in the back of a van with 5 other women she didn't recognize. None of them spoke. They all had the same shell-shocked expression Vera knew was on her own face. Through the window, she watched Ronin being loaded into a different vehicle. He looked back once, his eyes finding hers across the distance. She couldn't read his expression. Then the door closed, and he was gone. And Vera was moving, being driven away from the estate that had been both prison and sanctuary, to where she didn't know. But as the van pulled through the ruined gates and onto the main road, Vera realized something that should have terrified her, but instead felt like cold clarity. She'd crossed a line back there. Multiple lines. She'd fought, refused to run. Stood between Ronin and his enemies, not because he'd asked her to, but because she'd chosen to. There was no going back to the person she'd been before. That woman, the one who kept her head down and didn't make waves, had died somewhere between the rain and the gunfire and the moment she'd looked Nikolai in the eye and called him afraid. Whatever came next, whoever she became, it would be built on the ashes of everything she'd thought she knew about survival. And strangely, terrifyingly, Vera found she was okay with that. The van drove on through streets wet with evening rain, carrying her toward a future she couldn't. The holding cell smelled like disinfectant and fear. Vera sat on a metal bench bolted to the wall, her wrists still sore from the zip ties they'd finally cut off an hour ago. Or maybe it had been 2 hours. Time felt elastic in this windowless room with its fluorescent lights that never dimmed and its camera in the corner that watched everything. The 5 other women from the van were gone. They'd been processed separately. Fingerprints, photographs, questions Vera couldn't hear through the thick door. One by one, they'd been led away and hadn't come back. Now it was just Vera and the waiting. She'd asked for a lawyer. The agent who'd taken her statement, a woman with steel gray hair and eyes that gave nothing away, had smiled and said, "You're not under arrest, Miss Cade. You're a witness. We just need to ask you some questions." That had been hours ago. Vera's leg bounced with nervous energy. She'd replayed the scene in the conference room 100 times, trying to understand what had happened. The FBI had come in like they'd known exactly where to go, exactly when to strike. The timing had been too perfect. Someone had called them. But who? The door opened. Vera jumped to her feet. The agent from before entered, carrying a manila folder that looked too thin to contain anything important. Behind her came a man in an expensive suit who moved like someone used to command. Late 50s, military posture, eyes that tracked Vera with the kind of assessment she recognized from Ronin. Predator's eyes. "Miss Cade," the agent said, "this is Deputy Director Morrison, FBI. He has some questions." Morrison gestured to the bench. "Sit." It wasn't a request. Vera sat. Morrison remained standing, the folder unopened in his hands. He studied her for a long moment, and Vera forced herself not to look away. She had stared down Nikolai with a gun to her head. She could handle this. "You've had quite a month," Morrison said finally. Vera said nothing. Kidnapped off the street, delivered to one of the most dangerous criminals on the eastern seaboard, held in his home for 2 weeks. Morrison's tone was conversational, but his eyes stayed cold. Most people in your position would be traumatized. But here you are, defending him, standing between him and armed men. Very interesting behavior for a victim. I'm not defending him. I'm surviving. By attacking Nikolai Volkov's second in command with a lamp? So they knew about that. Of course they knew. Vera kept her face neutral. He surprised me. I reacted. You gave him a concussion and a fractured skull. That's a hell of a reaction. Morrison opened the folder, pulled out a photograph, and slid it across to Vera. Recognize this? The photo showed a man Vera had never seen before. 50s, nondescript features, the kind of face that would disappear in a crowd. She shook her head. His name is Thomas Gregor, or it was, until 2 months ago when he filed for bankruptcy and fled the country. Morrison pulled out another photo. This is him last week, in Kiev. Someone put a bullet in his head while he was eating breakfast. Vera's stomach turned. I don't know him. He's the man who ordered your kidnapping, the man who tried to give you to Ronin Vale as compensation for a stolen shipment. Morrison leaned forward. The man Vale bankrupted and then had killed. For you. The words hit like a slap. Vera's breath caught. That's not... Ronin didn't... We have witnesses, financial records, a paper trail that leads directly from Vale to the hitman in Kiev. Morrison's voice stayed level. He told you he'd handled the men who took you. Did you think that meant a stern talking to? They deserved it. The words came out before Vera could stop them. Morrison's eyebrow lifted. Did they? Even Gregor? A man you never met who made a business decision that happened to involve you. He ordered my kidnapping. He tried to trade you to Vale. And Vale, instead of refusing the trade or calling the police or doing anything a law-abiding citizen might do, decided to use you as an excuse to destroy a rival. Morrison pulled out more photos. Bodies, crime scenes, blood on expensive carpets. Gregor wasn't the only one. Every person who touched that deal is dead. 16 people, Miss Cade, 16 bodies in 2 weeks, all because Vale decided you were worth it. Vera couldn't breathe. The photos swam in her vision, faces frozen in death, bullet wounds, the clinical brutality of professional killings. 16 people. That's not my fault, she managed. No one said it was. But it is what happened, and you need to understand what Vale is. Morrison gathered the photos, set them aside. He's not your protector. He's a murderer who found a convenient excuse to eliminate competition. That's not true. Which part? That he killed them? We have proof. That he's a murderer? His record speaks for itself. Morrison sat on the bench beside her, close enough that Vera could smell his cologne. Or are you arguing that he cares about you? Because if that's what you think, I have some very bad news. Vera's hands were shaking. She clasped them together to hide it. What news? Morrison pulled out a new document. This one looked official. Typed pages, signatures, legal language Vera couldn't parse at a glance. This is a cooperation agreement between the FBI and Ronin Vale, signed 3 weeks ago, 3 days before you were kidnapped. The world tilted. What? Vera's voice came out as a whisper. Vale came to us. What he wanted to bring down the old families, dismantle the infrastructure they'd built over decades. He offered us everything, financial records, safe house locations, information about murders we'd never be able to solve otherwise. In exchange, we gave him immunity and protection. Morrison turned to a specific page, pointed to a date. This agreement was signed on October 15th. You were taken on October 18th, 3 days later. Quite a coincidence, don't you think? No, this couldn't be right. Vera grabbed the document, her eyes scanning the words that refused to make sense. But there it was. Ronin's signature at the bottom, witnessed by federal agents, dated exactly when Morrison said. He set it up, Morrison said quietly. The whole thing. Your kidnapping gave him cover to go after Gregor, and once you were in his house, you became the perfect smokescreen. Everyone focused on you, on whether he'd gone soft, whether you were making him weak. Meanwhile, he was feeding us intelligence on every major criminal operation in the city. No, Vera's voice cracked. He wouldn't... Why would he need me for that? He could have just cooperated without... Because men like Nikolai needed to believe Vale had changed, needed to see evidence of weakness. Morrison's tone gentled slightly, like he was explaining something to a child. You weren't his weakness, Miss Cade. You were his weapon. The proof that he wasn't the man he used to be, that he could be manipulated, that they could take him down. It made them sloppy. Made them bring their entire operation to his front door where we could grab them all at once. Vera stood abruptly, the document falling from numb fingers. That's insane. He risked his life. He risked nothing. We had snipers on every rooftop within half a mile. The moment shots were fired, we moved in. Morrison stood too. Vale orchestrated the entire confrontation. He knew Nikolai would come. He knew how it would play out. And he knew you'd step into the line of fire because you thought you were saving him. The room spun. Vera grabbed the edge of the bench to steady herself. Every moment of the past 2 weeks replayed in her head with this new, horrible context. Ronin's careful distance. The room without locks. The sudden confrontation with Nikolai that had felt almost staged. It had been staged. You're lying, Vera said, but the words had no conviction. Morrison picked up the document and handed it back to her. Read it, all of it, then tell me I'm lying. Vera's hand shook as she took the papers. She read, and with every line, every clause about cooperation and immunity and prosecution of third parties, the truth settled into her chest like a stone. Ronin had used her. The kindness, the protection, the rules about no one touching her. It had all been part of the performance. A show designed to make his enemies think he'd changed, think he was vulnerable, think they could strike. And she'd believed it, stood in front of guns for him, told Nikolai to shoot her instead, thought she was making a choice when really she'd been following a script Ronin had written weeks before she'd ever met him. Where is he? Vera's voice came out flat. Dead. Protective custody. He'll be debriefed, then relocated under witness protection once the trials are over. I want to see him. Morrison shook his head. That's not possible. I don't care if it's possible. Make it possible. Vera met his eyes, and whatever he saw there made him pause. You owe me that much. You let him use me as bait. The least you can do is let me ask him why. Morrison studied her. Then he pulled out his phone, made a call, spoke in quiet tones Vera couldn't quite hear. When he hung up, he said, 10 minutes, supervised, and if you try anything— I'm not going to try anything. Vera's voice was ice. I just want to hear him say it. They walked through corridors that all looked the same. White walls, fluorescent lights, doors with numbers instead of names. Other agents passed, some giving Morrison nods of recognition. Vera felt their eyes on her, assessing, judging. The victim who wasn't really a victim, the pawn who thought she was a player. Morrison stopped at a door marked Interview Room C. He doesn't know, you know. We kept the cooperation agreement classified. As far as he's concerned, you still think he's your protector. Good. Vera's smile was sharp enough to cut. Don't tell him. I want to see his face when I do. Morrison opened the door. Ronin sat at a metal table, his hands uncuffed, looking tired but unharmed. When he saw Vera, his expression shifted. Relief, concern, something that looked almost like joy. It made her want to scream. Vera. He stood, took a step toward her. Are you all right? They wouldn't tell me where they'd taken you if you were safe. Sit down. Vera's voice stopped him cold. And don't pretend you were worried. You knew exactly where I was. Ronin's eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? The cooperation agreement, signed 3 weeks ago. Vera pulled the document from where she'd been clutching it and threw it on the table between them. You want to explain that? The color drained from Ronin's face. Not guilt, calculation. Vera watched him process, watched him decide how to play this, and something inside her turned to ash. Vera, let me explain. Explain what? That you set me up? That my kidnapping was part of your deal with the FBI? That you used me as bait to make your enemies think you'd gone soft? Her voice was rising, but she couldn't stop it. Which part needs explaining exactly? It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? Vera slammed her hands on the table. Tell me. Tell me how it's different from what I just said. Ronin looked at Morrison, who stood by the door with his arms crossed. Can we have a moment? No, Morrison said flatly. Please. 5 minutes. I need to talk to her alone. Not happening. Say what you need to say with me here, or don't say it at all. Ronin's jaw tightened. He looked back at Vera, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw something in his face that might have been actual emotion. Regret, maybe? Or just annoyance at being caught. I made a deal with the FBI, he said quietly. That much is true. I offered them information in exchange for immunity and a way out of this life. I was tired, Vera. Tired of the violence and the constant fighting and knowing that eventually someone would put a bullet in my head. So yes, I cooperated. And me, you were an unexpected complication. Ronin ran a hand through his hair. Gregor's people grabbed you 3 days after I signed the agreement. I had no part in that. No knowledge it was going to happen. They showed up at my door with you, and I had to make a choice. What choice? Whether to kill me or use me? Whether to send you away or keep you safe? Ronin's voice hardened. I could have put you in a car that night and dropped you at a hospital. Let you go back to your life. But Gregor would have tried again. He would have seen you as unfinished business, and he would have sent people to silence you. So I kept you at the estate where I could protect you. Protect me. Vera laughed, bitter and sharp. Is that what you call it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you kept me close so your enemies would see me, so they'd think I was making you weak. They were going to come for me anyway, with or without you. Ronin leaned forward. Nikolai had been planning a move for months. The council was fracturing. My cooperation with the FBI just gave me a way to control the timing and the location, to make sure when it happened, we'd all survive it. We? Vera's voice cracked. There is no we. There never was. You were using me the whole time. I was protecting you, while using me as bait, while making sure you didn't get killed in the crossfire. Ronin's voice finally rose to match hers. You want to know the truth? Fine. Here it is. Yes, I knew my enemies would see you as weakness. Yes, I knew that would make them move faster than they otherwise would have. And yes, I used that to my advantage. But I also made damn sure you were never in real danger. The FBI had the estate surrounded from day one. Snipers, surveillance, the whole 9 yards. If anyone had actually tried to hurt you... If anyone had tried? Vera's voice went dangerously quiet. Nikolai put a gun to my head. I stood in a conference room with a dozen weapons pointed at me. I watched people die on your driveway. What part of that wasn't real danger? The part where I would have died before letting them actually pull the trigger. Ronin's eyes burned. You think I would have let Nikolai shoot you? You think I would have stood there and watched? I think you would have done whatever served your purpose, which was bringing down the old families and walking away with immunity. Vera's hands were shaking again. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me that if killing me had been necessary to maintain your cover, you wouldn't have done it. The silence stretched. Ronin didn't answer. That's what I thought. Vera pushed back from the table, her chair scraping against the floor. I hope your immunity was worth it. I hope taking down Nikolai and Gregor and everyone else makes you feel like a hero. Because from where I'm standing, you're just another predator who found a clever way to justify eating people. Vera, don't. She held up a hand. Don't say my name like you know me, like you care. You don't get to do that anymore. She turned toward the door. Morrison was already opening it. Wait. Ronin's voice stopped her. There's something else you need to know. Vera didn't turn around. What? The reason I went to the FBI in the first place. The reason I decided to burn it all down and walk away. He paused. It was because of you. Now Vera did turn. What are you talking about? I didn't even know you 3 weeks ago. Not you specifically, women like you. Ronin stood, and the exhaustion in his face looked real for the first time. I've been doing this for 20 years. Built an empire on violence and fear and all the things I told myself were necessary. And then Gregor tried to trade a human being like she was cattle, and every other crime lord I knew thought that was just business as usual, and I realized... He trailed off. Realized what? That I'd become exactly what I'd always hated, the kind of man who looks at suffering and sees opportunity, who treats people as resources to be exploited. Ronin's voice dropped. So I decided to end it, all of it, tear down the whole corrupt system and make sure no one else could do what we'd been doing. Vera stared at him. You expect me to believe that? That you suddenly grew a conscience? I don't expect you to believe anything. I'm just telling you what happened. Ronin sat back down, suddenly looking every one of his years. When you showed up at my door, beaten and terrified, you weren't part of some grand plan. You were a reminder of why I was doing this. And yes, I used you. I'm not going to pretend I didn't. But I also made sure you were safe, made sure you ate and slept and had space to heal. Made sure no one laid a hand on you, while letting me think I was making choices. Vera's anger felt cold now, precise. While letting me believe I was staying because I wanted to, not because you needed me there. You could have left at any time. Could I? Really? Vera laughed without humor. Where would I have gone? Back to the apartment I'd been evicted from? The job I'd lost? Into hiding from Gregor's men? You made sure I had no options except staying with you. That's not protection. That's control dressed up to look like kindness. Ronin was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible. You're right. The admission caught Vera off guard. I did control you. I did manipulate the situation to make sure you'd stay. I told myself it was for your own good, that I was keeping you safe. But the truth is I needed you there. Needed someone to be the face of what I was trying to protect. Needed proof that this was about something bigger than revenge or power plays. He met her eyes. And I'm sorry, for what that's worth. It was worth nothing. Vera wanted it to be worth nothing. But there was something in his face, real regret, real shame, that made her pause. Why are you telling me this? She asked. Because you deserved to know. And because, Ronin hesitated, because you were right. Back in the conference room when you told Nikolai he was afraid of being wrong. That's what I was afraid of too, being wrong about everything I'd built my life on. And you standing up to him, refusing to run, it proved I wasn't wrong, that there was another way. Don't, Vera's voice cracked. Don't you dare make me part of your redemption story. I'm not here to make you feel better about your choices. I know that. Do you? Because it sounds like you're trying to convince yourself that using me was noble, that it was all for some greater good. She took a step toward him, her eyes blazing. You want to tear down a corrupt system? Fine. But don't pretend you did it for me. You did it for you, because you were tired and scared and looking for a way out. You're right about that too. Ronin's smile was sad. I've never claimed to be anything other than selfish. Then we're done here. Vera turned back to Morrison. Get me out of here. Vera, wait. No. She didn't look back. We're done. Whatever debt you think you owe me, whatever guilt you're carrying, that's your problem, not mine. Morrison led her out. The door closed behind them, cutting off whatever Ronin had been about to say. In the hallway, Vera's legs went weak. She leaned against the wall, her breath coming in short gasps that felt like drowning. You okay? Morrison asked. Vera almost laughed. No, I'm really not. For what it's worth, I think you're right about him. He's selfish. He did use you. Morrison pulled out a card and handed it to her, but he also made sure you survived. In this world, sometimes that's the best you can hope for. Vera took the card without looking at it. What happens now? Now we process the evidence, build our cases, and start prosecuting. Nikolai, his lieutenants, every major criminal in 3 states, they're all going down. Vale's testimony will put them away for life. And me? You're free to go. We'll need you to testify eventually, but for now, you're just a witness who got caught in the crossfire. Morrison gestured down the hallway. There's a victim's advocate waiting for you. She'll help you get set up with temporary housing, some money to get back on your feet. Fresh start. Fresh start. The words felt hollow. Vera had lost her apartment, her job, 2 weeks of her life, and whatever illusions she'd had left about how the world worked. She'd stood in front of guns thinking she was being brave, when really she'd been playing a part in someone else's script. What about Ronin? She asked. What happens to him? Witness protection. New name, new life, new identity. Once the trials are over, he disappears. Morrison's expression was unreadable. You'll never see him again. Good. That was good. Vera didn't want to see him again. Didn't want to look at his face and remember how she'd believed he was different, how she'd thought his rules and standards meant something real. But a small, traitorous part of her mind whispered that she'd miss him anyway. Miss the conversations over breakfast, the way he'd asked if she was hurt instead of blaming her for the broken china, the quiet intensity of someone who saw her as a person instead of a problem. Even if it had all been a lie, part of her had needed it. I want to testify, Vera said suddenly. Morrison raised an eyebrow. Against who? All of them. Nikolai, his men, everyone involved. You want to tear down the system? I'll help. Put me on the stand and let me tell them exactly what these men are capable of. Miss Cade, testifying in cases like this can be dangerous, even with protective measures. I don't care. Vera's voice was steel. They took me off the street like I was nothing, traded me like I was property, put a gun to my head and told me I existed to make someone else look weak. I want them to hear from me. I want them to know I survived. Morrison studied her. Then he nodded slowly. All right, we'll make it happen, but it won't be easy. Defense attorneys will tear into you. They'll try to discredit you, make you look like you were complicit. Let them try. Vera straightened. I've been scared for 2 weeks. I'm done being scared. Good. Fear gets people killed in this world. Morrison gestured for her to follow. Come on, let's get you set up with the advocate. She'll go over everything you need to know. They walked through more corridors, more doors, until they reached a waiting room where a woman with kind eyes and sensible shoes stood up and introduced herself as Sarah. She had pamphlets about trauma resources and victims' rights and safe housing options. Vera barely heard her. Her mind was still in that interview room, replaying the conversation with Ronin, turning over every word for hidden meanings. It was because of you. Women like you. Did she believe that? That he'd made a decision to dismantle his empire because of principle and not just self-preservation? Did it even matter? Sarah was talking about apartments, about job placement services, about counseling. Vera nodded at appropriate moments, signed forms she didn't read, accepted a phone with a new number programmed in. 2 hours later, she walked out of the FBI building into afternoon sunlight that felt wrong. Too bright, too normal, like the world should have changed to match the wreckage inside her but hadn't bothered. A car was waiting, driven by someone Sarah called Agent Chen, who had kind eyes and didn't ask questions. They drove through the city Vera had lived in for 5 years but felt like a stranger in now. Past the diner where she'd worked, which had a help wanted sign in the window. Past the corner where Victor's people had grabbed her, which looked exactly the same as it had that night. The apartment they took her to was in a different part of town. Safe, Sarah had said. Subsidized by victim services for the next 3 months. After that, Vera would need to figure something else out. Agent Chen helped her inside, showed her where everything was, and left her with another card and instructions to call if she needed anything. Then Vera was alone. The apartment was small but clean, generic furniture that looked like it came from a catalog, white walls, windows that overlooked a parking lot, a bed that wasn't hers, in a place that wasn't home, in a life that felt like someone else's. Vera sat on the edge of the bed and stared at her hands. They looked the same as they had a month ago. But everything else was different. She was different. The woman who'd worked double shifts and saved every penny and thought that keeping her head down would keep her safe. That woman was gone. Burned away in the confrontation at the estate, in the moment she'd stood up and refused to be used as a shield. What was left felt raw, exposed, like she'd shed a skin and hadn't grown a new one yet. Her phone buzzed. The new one, from the FBI. A text from an unknown number. I know you don't want to hear from me, but you should know that what I told you was true. All of it. And for what it's worth, you were the bravest thing I've seen in 20 years. Vera stared at the message. Then she deleted it without responding. Brave. He thought she was brave, but courage required choice, and she hadn't chosen any of this. She'd been grabbed off the street and thrown into someone else's war and told to be grateful for the prison they'd dressed up as protection. Except, that wasn't quite true, was it? She'd chosen to go downstairs during the confrontation, chosen to stand between Ronin and Nikolai's guns, chosen to call Nikolai afraid to his face. Those hadn't been part of anyone's script but her own. Maybe that was what bravery looked like in this world. Not heroic gestures or grand sacrifices, but small acts of defiance when everything said to run. Vera's phone buzzed again. Different number this time. She almost ignored it, then looked. This is Morrison. We've moved up the timeline. Grand jury hearing next week. You'll need to come in for prep starting tomorrow. Are you ready? Was she ready? To sit in a room and relive the worst weeks of her life? To face defense attorneys who'd call her a liar and a criminal and worse? To help put away men who'd already proven they had no problem hurting her? Vera's fingers hovered over the keyboard, Then she typed, yes. She hit send before she could second guess it. Tomorrow, she'd figure out how to be the person who could do this. Tonight, she'd just survive being alone with the truth of what had happened. The sun set outside her window, painting the parking lot in shades of orange and red that looked like fire. Vera watched it fade to darkness, then stood and checked the locks on her door 3 times before accepting they were secure. She brushed her teeth with a toothbrush from the welcome basket Sarah had left, changed into pajamas that weren't hers, climbed into bed and lay staring at the ceiling, waiting for sleep that refused to come. At midnight, her phone buzzed. Another text from the same unknown number Ronin had used. I lied to you about something. Vera stared at the message, her heart hammering. She should ignore it, should block the number, but her fingers moved without permission. What? The response came immediately. When I said I kept you close to protect you, that was only half true. I also kept you close because I wanted to. Because talking to you at breakfast was the only part of my day that felt real. Because watching you rebuild yourself was more interesting than anything I'd done in years. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you that before. I'm sorry for all of it. Vera read the message 3 times. Then she wrote back, don't contact me again. She blocked the number, deleted the conversation, threw the phone across the room where it hit the wall and clattered to the floor. Then she buried her face in the pillow and finally let herself cry. Not for Ronin, not for what they could have been if the circumstances had been different, for herself, for the version of her that had believed safety was possible, that had thought someone powerful might choose to protect her without wanting something in return. That woman was dead now, and Vera had to figure out who she'd become in the ashes. Morning came eventually. Vera woke gritty-eyed and hollow, her throat raw from crying. She showered, dressed in clothes the FBI had provided, and made coffee from the supplies in the cabinet. At 9 o'clock, Agent Chen picked her up. They drove back to the federal building where Morrison was waiting with 3 other attorneys and a presentation about what the grand jury process would look like. Vera listened, took notes, asked questions that sounded confident even though her insides were churning. You'll be the key witness, Morrison said. Your testimony establishes the human trafficking element. Without you, we can get them on racketeering and conspiracy, but the kidnapping and attempted murder charges require your statement. What if I freeze up there? Vera asked. Then we pause, you collect yourself, and you continue. Morrison's expression was firm. These men tried to break you. Don't let them succeed. The prep session lasted 6 hours. By the end, Vera's head was spinning with legal terminology and procedures, with warnings about what the defense would try and how to handle hostile questions. Remember, one of the attorneys said as they wrapped up, they're going to try to make this about your relationship with Vale. They'll suggest you were complicit, that you stayed willingly, that you're testifying out of revenge because he rejected you. Stay calm, stick to the facts, don't let them rattle you. Vera nodded, even though the idea of being accused of complicity made her want to scream. She hadn't asked for any of this. Hadn't wanted to be kidnapped or used or caught in the middle of a gang war. But she'd survived it, and now she was going to make sure everyone knew what these men had done. Agent Chen drove her back to the apartment. The sun was setting again, another day gone, another night coming. Vera thanked him and headed inside. The apartment felt even more foreign than it had the night before. Too quiet. Too empty. She turned on the TV for noise, made herself eat even though food tasted like cardboard, and tried not to think about the grand jury hearing looming in 4 days. At 10 p.m., someone knocked on her door. Vera froze. Nobody knew she was here except the FBI and victim services. Agent Chen had promised the address was confidential. Another knock. Harder this time. Vera? I know you're in there. The voice made her blood run cold. Not Ronin. Not Nikolai. Gregor. Except Gregor was dead. Killed in Kiev. Morrison had shown her the photo. Open the door, the voice said. We need to talk. Vera grabbed her phone, dialed 911 with shaking fingers. 911! What's your emergency? There's someone at my door. They shouldn't know where I am. The door exploded inward. Not kicked. Blown. The lock mechanism shattered, wood splintering, and 2 men in tactical gear rushed through. One grabbed Vera before she could scream, hand over her mouth, while the other secured the apartment. Her phone clattered to the floor. She heard the 911 operator's tinny voice asking what was happening before one of the men crushed it under his boot. "Sorry about the entrance," a voice said from the hallway. "But we're on a timeline." A man stepped through the ruined doorway. Not Gregor, someone else. 50s, expensive suit, the kind of face that belonged in boardrooms and country clubs. He looked at Vera with mild curiosity, like she was an interesting specimen. "Miss Cade, I'm Marcus Thorne. We haven't been formally introduced, but I understand you're about to testify against some associates of mine." Vera couldn't respond with the hand clamped over her mouth. She struggled, but the man holding her was strong and knew what he was doing. Thorne gestured, and the hand moved slightly. "I'm going to need you to be quiet. Can you do that? Or do we need to use unpleasant methods?" Vera nodded. The hand lifted. "Who are you?" she managed. "I already told you. Marcus Thorne. I run a private equity firm downtown. Very boring work. Numbers and spreadsheets and conference calls." He smiled. "I also happen to own a significant portion of the infrastructure your friend Mr. Vale is trying to dismantle, which makes your upcoming testimony problematic." "How did you find me? Please, do you think the FBI is the only organization with access to confidential addresses? I've had people in every relevant office for years." Thorne walked farther into the apartment, examining it like he was considering buying it. "Nice place, a bit generic, but functional. Better than where you were before the kidnapping, I imagine. What do you want?" "Straight to the point. I appreciate that." Thorne turned to face her. "I want you to not testify." "Or what? You'll kill me?" Vera's voice shook but held. "Because the FBI will just find another witness. Ronin already gave them everything." "True. But Vale's testimony is hearsay without corroboration. Yours is firsthand. You're the victim, the human element, the face that makes juries care. Without you, their case is significantly weaker." Thorne's smile widened. "So yes, I could kill you. But I'm hoping we can come to a more mutually beneficial arrangement." "There's no arrangement. Let me go and get out before the police come." "The police aren't coming." Thorne pulled out a phone, showed her the screen. It displayed what looked like a dispatcher's log. "That 911 call? Logged as a pocket dial. Happens all the time in this neighborhood, apparently. They'll send someone by eventually to check, but not for another hour at least." Vera's stomach dropped. "So here's my offer," Thorne continued. "You leave town, tonight, right now. My people will set you up somewhere nice. Florida, maybe. California. Wherever you want. New identity, comfortable income, a fresh start with no strings attached. All you have to do is disappear and not testify." "And if I refuse?" Thorne's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes went cold. "Then we make this look like suicide. Traumatized woman, couldn't handle the stress, left a note saying she couldn't face testifying. Very tragic. The newspapers will be sympathetic." Vera's mind raced. These men had blown through her door like it was paper. They had inside information from the FBI. They could fake 911 logs and make murders look like suicides, and they wanted her gone badly enough to offer her a way out, which meant her testimony mattered, really mattered. "How long do I have to decide?" she asked. "Until my watch alarm goes off in 3 minutes. After that, the decision is made for you." Thorne checked an expensive watch on his wrist. "I'd advise you to choose wisely. Living as someone else in Florida sounds better than dying as yourself in this apartment, doesn't it?" Vera looked at the man holding her, at the other one by the door, blocking escape, at Thorne with his mild smile and murderer's eyes. She thought about Morrison telling her to be brave, about Ronin saying she was the bravest thing he'd seen, about standing in front of Nikolai's guns and refusing to be a shield, and she thought about what it would mean to run now, to let these men scare her into silence, to let everyone who'd been hurt by people like them never get justice because she'd chosen survival over truth. "No," Vera said. Thorne's smile faded. "Excuse me?" "I said no. I'm testifying. Kill me if you want, but I'm not running." "You're making a mistake." "Probably, but it's my mistake to make." Vera met his eyes. "You can't control me. Not you, not Ronin, not anyone. I'm done being a thing people move around." The alarm on Thorne's watch beeped. He sighed. "Unfortunate. I was hoping we could resolve this civilly." He nodded to the man holding Vera. "Make it quick. and make sure the note is convincing. The man's grip tightened. His other hand reached for something at his belt. A syringe, Vera realized with horror. Whatever was in it would probably look like an overdose. She had seconds. Vera threw her head back as hard as she could, felt it connect with the man's nose. He swore and loosened his grip just enough. She twisted, drove her elbow into his ribs, broke free. The other man was already moving. Vera grabbed the lamp from the side table, the only weapon in reach, and swung it wildly. It caught him in the arm. Not enough to stop him, but enough to make him hesitate. She ran. Through the bedroom, to the window she'd checked earlier and found unlocked because it was second floor. And who would expect someone to jump? Vera opened it and jumped. She hit the fire escape hard enough to knock the wind out of her lungs. Above her she heard shouting, footsteps pounding. They were coming. She scrambled down the metal stairs, her bare feet screaming on the cold grating. 1 flight, 2. She could see the street below, people walking, cars passing, normal life happening while she ran for hers. The fire escape ladder was one of those weighted ones that wouldn't drop unless someone pulled it. Vera grabbed the mechanism and yanked. It stuck. She yanked harder, panic making her strong. It dropped with a screech of metal on metal. She climbed down as fast as her shaking legs would allow, hit the pavement running, turned the corner without knowing where she was going, just that it needed to be away. Behind her, car doors slammed. An engine roared. They were following. Vera ducked into an alley, then another, zigzagging through the neighborhood she barely knew. Her lungs burned. Her feet were bleeding. She couldn't keep this up much longer. A main street appeared ahead. Lights, traffic, people, witnesses. Vera sprinted toward it, burst out onto the sidewalk, almost into oncoming traffic. A cab screeched to a stop. The driver leaned on the horn, shouting. Vera yanked open the back door and threw herself inside. "Drive, please, they're following me." "Lady, what?" "Just drive." She looked back and saw the dark sedan turning the corner, headlights cutting through the darkness. "Please, they're going to kill me, just drive." The urgency in her voice must have convinced him. The cab accelerated, merging into traffic. Vera watched through the back window as the sedan tried to follow but got cut off by a bus. "Where to?" the driver asked, eyeing her in the rearview mirror. Vera realized she had no idea. No phone, no money, no shoes, just the pajamas she'd been wearing and the knowledge that her safe apartment wasn't safe anymore. "The FBI building," she said. "Downtown, fast as you can." The driver's eyes went wide, but he didn't argue. He took a turn that threw Vera against the door, then accelerated down a street she didn't recognize. 15 minutes later, they pulled up in front of the federal building. Vera had no way to pay him. "I don't have money," she said. "But if you come inside with me, the FBI will—" "Just go," the driver said. He looked shaken. "Whatever you're mixed up in, I don't want any part of it." Vera stumbled out of the cab and ran up the steps to the building entrance. Guards blocked her way. She must have looked insane, barefoot and bleeding and wild-eyed. "I need Morrison," she gasped. "Deputy Director Morrison, tell him Vera Cade is here and someone just tried to kill me." The guards exchanged glances. One spoke into his radio. 30 seconds later, Morrison himself came through the doors, flanked by agents with weapons drawn. "What happened?" he demanded. Vera told him. All of it. The blown door, Marcus Thorne, the offer and the threat, and the jump from the fire escape. Morrison's expression went from concerned to furious. "Get her inside," he snapped. "Full protective detail. And find out how the hell they got her address." Vera was hustled into the building, down corridors that felt familiar now, to a conference room where more agents appeared with medical supplies and questions. Someone bandaged her feet while she repeated her story, adding details, describing Thorne's face and voice. "Marcus Thorne," Morrison said grimly. "Private equity. We've had our eye on him for years, but could never prove his connection to organized crime. He's careful. Insulated. This is the first time he's ever exposed himself personally." "He knew about the 911 call," Vera said. "He showed me the dispatch log, said it was logged as a pocket dial." Morrison's jaw tightened, which means he has someone inside emergency services, maybe inside the FBI too. He looked at the other agents. "Lockdown protocols. Nobody talks about Miss Cade's location to anyone not in this room. We move her tonight to a secure facility." "What about the grand jury?" Vera asked. "It's in 4 days. We'll make it work. But you're going dark until then. No phone, no contact with anyone outside authorized personnel. Can you handle that?" Vera thought about Marcus Thorne's cold smile, about the syringe that would have made her death look voluntary, about how close she'd come to never testifying at all. "Yes," she said, "I can handle it." But as agents led her deeper into the building, to a room with no windows and a guard at the door, Vera wondered if that was true. She'd crossed another line tonight, not just refusing to run, but fighting back, hurting her attacker, jumping from a second-story window because staying meant dying. The woman she'd been a month ago would never have done those things, and the woman she was becoming terrified her almost as much as the men who wanted her dead. Because once you started fighting back, once you accepted that survival meant hurting people before they hurt you, where did it stop? When did you become the monster? Vera lay on the cot in the secure room, staring at the ceiling, and didn't have an answer. But in 4 days, she'd stand in front of a grand jury and tell them everything. And then she'd find out if truth was really more powerful than the people who wanted to bury it. The secure room had no windows and smelled like industrial cleaner and stale air. Vera lay on the cot, her bandaged feet throbbing in time with her heartbeat, and counted the ceiling tiles for the 100th time. 48. Always 48. 3 days until the grand jury hearing. 3 days locked in this box with nothing but her thoughts, and the guard outside who changed every 8 hours and never spoke to her beyond meal delivery or bathroom break. She'd asked for books. They'd brought her legal documents to review instead. Transcripts of intercepted conversations, financial records showing money flowing through shell companies, photographs of crime scenes she'd never wanted to see. Morrison wanted her prepared, wanted her to understand the scope of what she was testifying against. Vera understood. She understood that Marcus Thorne and men like him had built an empire on suffering, that they'd killed dozens, maybe hundreds of people over the years, that her testimony was a thread, and if she pulled it hard enough, the whole thing might unravel. She also understood that they'd kill her the moment they got the chance. The door opened. Vera sat up too fast, her vision swimming. She'd been sleeping badly, waking every hour to phantom sounds. Footsteps, whispers, the scrape of metal that might be a lock being picked. Morrison entered, carrying a folder and looking like he hadn't slept in days. Dark circles under his eyes, tie loosened, the kind of exhaustion that came from holding too many things together at once. "We have a problem," he said without preamble. Vera's stomach dropped. What kind of problem? Morrison sat on the folding chair across from her cot, the folder unopened on his lap. "Marcus Thorne is in the wind. Disappeared 48 hours ago. Private jet filed a flight plan to Grand Cayman, but it never landed there. We think he's still in the country, but we can't find him." "Which means he's planning something." "Which means he's planning something," Morrison agreed. "We've increased security for the grand jury hearing. Metal detectors, armed guards, the works. But I need to be honest with you. If Thorne is desperate enough to run, he's desperate enough to try something during the hearing itself." Vera's hands were shaking again. She clasped them together. "You want me to back out? I want you to know what you're walking into. This isn't going to be a normal grand jury testimony. It's going to be a target." Morrison finally opened the folder, pulled out a photograph. "We think this is Thorne's security chief. Ex-military, multiple tours in Afghanistan, dishonorable discharge for actions we can't get details on. If Thorne is planning an attack, this is the man who'll execute it." The photograph showed a man in his 40s with a shaved head and eyes that looked dead even in the still image. The kind of face that had seen violence and decided it was just another tool. "What's his name?" Vera asked. "Officially, James Carson. But he's used a dozen aliases over the years. We've connected him to 3 assassinations and suspected him in a dozen more." Morrison set the photo aside. "If he's in that courthouse, people will die. Then catch him before he gets there. We're trying, but he's a ghost. No phone activity, no credit cards, no hits on facial recognition. He could be anywhere." Morrison leaned forward. "Vera, I need you to tell me right now, are you sure you want to do this? Because once you walk into that courtroom, there's no taking it back." Vera thought about Marcus Thorne's cold smile, about the syringe that would have ended her life and made it look like she'd chosen to die, about Ronin's message saying she was brave when really she'd just been angry. "I'm sure," she said. Morrison studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "All right, then we go with full protocols. You'll be transported in an armored vehicle with a 4-car escort. We'll enter through the underground garage and use the secure elevator straight to the grand jury floor. The route will be kept classified until the morning of. Only 6 people know the plan, and I trust all of them with my life. What about inside the courthouse? We'll have agents positioned at every entrance and exit. The grand jury room itself will be swept for explosives and surveillance devices. No one gets in without passing through security. Morrison pulled out another document. This is a layout of the courthouse. I want you to memorize it. All the exits, all the stairwells, anywhere you could run if things go wrong. Vera took the paper with numb fingers. You think they will? Go wrong? I think we should prepare for every possibility. Morrison stood. Get some rest. We move in 72 hours. He left before Vera could ask any more questions. The guard locked the door behind him with a click that sounded too final. Vera spread the courthouse layout on her cot and started memorizing. East wing stairwell, west wing elevator, underground parking access, emergency exits marked in red. She traced the route from the secure elevator to the grand jury room with her finger, straight shot down a hallway, through 2 security checkpoints, into a room where 23 strangers would decide if there was enough evidence to indict. 23 people who didn't know her, who'd judge her credibility based on how she spoke, how she held herself, whether she cried or stayed stoic. Vera had never been good at performing, had always been the girl who flinched at loud noises and apologized too much and tried to make herself smaller so people would forget she existed. But that girl was dead, burned away in fire escapes and shattered doors, and the moment she'd told Marcus Thorne no. Whoever walked into that courthouse in 3 days would need to be someone else. Someone who could stand in front of 23 strangers and a room full of federal agents and speak truth to power without her voice shaking. Vera didn't know if she could be that person, but she had 72 hours to figure it out. The hours blurred together. Vera slept in fits and starts, waking from nightmares where Carson's dead eyes stared at her from across a courtroom. She ate the meals they brought without tasting them. She reviewed transcripts until the words stopped making sense. Morrison came back the next day with an attorney, a woman named Patricia who had kind eyes and a firm handshake. She spent 6 hours prepping Vera on what to expect, how to answer questions, what to do if the defense tried to rattle her. They can't cross-examine you in a grand jury, Patricia explained, but they can submit questions through the prosecutor. They'll try to make you look unreliable, like you're making this up for attention or revenge. How do I stop them? You tell the truth, simple, clear, no embellishment. If you don't remember something, say you don't remember. If you're not sure, say you're not sure. The moment you start guessing or filling in blanks, they'll use it against you. Vera nodded, taking notes on a legal pad they'd given her. Her handwriting looked shaky, foreign. What if I freeze up there, she asked. The same question she'd asked Morrison, but Patricia's answer might be different. Then you take a breath, ask for water, ask for a moment to collect yourself. Patricia's smile was reassuring. Grand juries are more informal than trials. These are regular people, not legal experts. They want to understand what happened to you. Just help them understand. Just help them understand. Like it was simple. Like she could compress 2 weeks of terror and manipulation and gunfire into a narrative that made sense to people who'd never had violence touch their lives. Vera wanted to scream that it wasn't simple, that nothing about this was simple. But she swallowed the scream and nodded and took more notes she'd never look at again. Patricia left. Morrison came back with dinner and news that James Carson had been spotted near the courthouse that morning. We didn't get him, Morrison said before Vera could ask. He was gone by the time our team arrived, but it confirms he's here. He's planning something. What are you going to do? Double the security, triple it. We'll have sharpshooters on the roofs, agents in plainclothes throughout the building, K-9 units sweeping for explosives every hour. Morrison's jaw was tight. He won't get to you. I promise. Promises meant nothing in this world. Vera had learned that the hard way, but she appreciated Morrison trying anyway. Thank you, she said. Morrison left. The guard changed shifts. Vera lay on her cot and stared at the ceiling tiles and wondered if she'd see tomorrow. 48 tiles. Still 48. Morning came too fast. Vera woke to the sound of the door opening and Morrison standing there with body armor in his hands. Time to go, he said. Vera's mouth went dry. It's today? It's today. Morrison set the armor on her cot. Put this on. Over your clothes. It's heavy, but it might save your life. Vera's hand shook as she strapped on the vest. It felt like wearing concrete, the weight pressing down on her shoulders until her back ached. Morrison helped her adjust the straps, his movements efficient and practiced. "Car's waiting," he said. "We're taking a different route than planned. Only you and I know about the change. If there's a leak, this should throw them off." The precautions should have been reassuring. Instead, they just highlighted how dangerous this was, how many ways it could go wrong. Vera followed Morrison through corridors she'd never seen, down a service elevator that smelled like garbage, into an underground garage where 3 identical black SUVs idled with their engines running. "Middle vehicle," Morrison said. "Stay low once we're moving." Vera climbed in. The interior was all dark leather and tinted windows. 2 agents sat in the front, a man and a woman, both armed, both looking alert in a way that made Vera's skin crawl. Morrison got in beside her. "Go." The vehicles moved as a unit, pulling out of the garage into morning sunlight that felt too bright. Vera squinted against it, her eyes adjusting slowly. Through the tinted windows, she could see normal people doing normal things, walking dogs, getting coffee, living lives that hadn't been torn apart. She envied them so much it hurt. The drive should have taken 20 minutes. They did it in 12, running lights and using routes Vera didn't recognize. The other 2 SUVs stayed close, one ahead and one behind, forming a protective cocoon. 2 minutes out, the driver said. Morrison's phone buzzed. He looked at it, frowned, typed something quickly. Carson was spotted again, 3 blocks from the courthouse, heading away. "Away?" Vera asked. "That's good, right? Or it's a feint, making us think he's leaving when really he's already inside." Morrison's jaw tightened. "Stay sharp." The courthouse appeared ahead, a massive stone building that looked like it had been designed to intimidate. Steps leading up to columned entrances, windows reflecting the morning sky, American flags snapping in the wind. But they didn't use the front entrance. The SUVs curved around to the back, descending into an underground garage that looked like it belonged in a spy movie. Concrete pillars, harsh lighting, armed guards at a checkpoint that lowered a barrier to let them through. They stopped. The vehicle doors opened. "Stay between us," Morrison instructed. Vera climbed out into air that smelled like exhaust and gun oil. Agents surrounded her immediately. Morrison on her left, another agent on her right, more behind and ahead. They moved as a group toward an elevator, their formation tight enough that Vera couldn't see much beyond their bodies. The elevator doors opened. They filed in. Someone hit the button for the 4th floor. The ascent felt like it took hours. Vera's heart hammered against the body armor, her breath coming short and fast. She forced herself to slow it down. In through the nose, out through the mouth, the way her first foster mother had taught her when she'd had panic attacks. That woman's face was fuzzy in Vera's memory now, replaced by sharper images, Ronin's calculating stare, Nikolai's gun against her temple, Thorne's cold smile. The elevator dinged. 4th floor. Morrison stepped out first, scanning the hallway. Clear. They moved down a corridor that looked official and sterile. Marble floors, portraits of judges in heavy frames, wooden doors with brass nameplates. Other people passed, lawyers in suits, clerks carrying files, regular people who belonged here. None of them looked twice at Vera and her armed escort, like this was normal, like people were always moved through courthouses in body armor with guns drawn. The grand jury room was at the end of the hall. 2 agents stood outside, earpieces visible, hands resting on holstered weapons. They nodded at Morrison. "Swept 30 minutes ago," one said. "Clean." Morrison turned to Vera. "You ready?" No, she wasn't ready, would never be ready. But Vera nodded anyway. "You'll go in alone. I'll be right outside if you need anything. Patricia is already in there. She'll introduce you and guide the questioning." Morrison's hand landed on her shoulder, brief and awkward. "You've got this." Vera wanted to believe him. She pushed open the door. The grand jury room was smaller than she'd expected. 23 people sat in tiered seats like a classroom, ranging from a woman who looked barely 20 to a man who had to be in his 70s. They all turned to look at Vera as she entered. Patricia stood at the front beside the prosecutor, a man Vera had met once in prep, whose name escaped her now. She gave Vera an encouraging smile. "Miss Cade," the prosecutor said, "please have a seat." Vera sat in the chair facing the jury. Her hands gripped the armrests hard enough to hurt. 23 pairs of eyes watched her with expressions ranging from curious to sympathetic to skeptical. "State your full name for the record," the prosecutor said. "Vera Marie Cade. And you're here to testify about events that occurred on October 18th of this year, is that correct?" Yes. The questioning began. Simple at first. Where she'd lived, where she'd worked, what she'd been doing the night she was kidnapped. Vera answered in a voice that sounded stronger than she felt, focusing on facts and avoiding embellishment like Patricia had taught her. Then the prosecutor pulled up a photograph on a screen. "Do you recognize this man?" Victor. His face frozen in a surveillance photo, his expression mean even in still image. "Yes, he was one of the men who grabbed me off the street." "Can you describe what happened that night?" Vera did. She told them about closing up the diner, about hands grabbing her from behind, about the van and the zip ties and the hours of driving while men argued in Russian about what to do with her. She told them about being thrown at Ronin's feet in the rain. Some of the jurors looked horrified. Others took notes. An older woman in the front row had tears in her eyes. "And when you arrived at Mr. Vale's estate, what happened?" This was the tricky part, the part where she had to explain Ronin without making him sound like a savior or a villain. Just a man who'd made choices Vera still didn't fully understand. "He dismissed the men who'd brought me, gave me medical attention and a place to stay. He said I could leave whenever I wanted." "But you didn't leave." "No." "Why not?" Vera chose her words carefully. "Because I had nowhere to go. I'd been evicted from my apartment, lost my job, and the men who'd grabbed me were still out there. Mr. Vale said he could protect me." "And did he? Protect you?" "Yes. No one at the estate hurt me or threatened me. I had my own room, meals, freedom to move around the house and grounds." A juror in the back raised his hand. The prosecutor nodded. "Question from Juror 7, the prosecutor said. "If you were free to leave and no one was hurting you, why do you consider this a kidnapping?" Vera looked at the man who'd asked. Middle-aged, businessman type, the kind who probably thought bad things only happened to people who made bad choices. "Because I didn't choose to be there," she said. "I was taken off the street against my will and delivered to a stranger's house. The fact that he chose not to rape or kill me doesn't make it consensual. It just means he chose differently than whoever grabbed me expected." The bluntness of her words made several jurors shift uncomfortably. Good. Vera wanted them uncomfortable, wanted them to understand that this wasn't some romantic story about a crime lord with a heart of gold. The prosecutor continued. "Can you describe the events of October 31st, the day Nikolai Volkov and his associates came to the Vale estate?" Vera described the siege, the guns, the shouting, the moment she'd stepped into the crossfire, thinking she could stop it. She described Nikolai putting a gun to her head in Ronin's face when he'd realized she wouldn't run. She did not mention the FBI's cooperation agreement. Morrison had been clear. That was classified information, not relevant to the kidnapping charges. But leaving it out felt like lying by omission. "And after the FBI intervened, what happened to you?" "I was taken into protective custody, given a safe apartment." Vera's voice hardened. "Which turned out not to be safe at all." She told them about Marcus Thorne, about the blown door and the offer and the syringe, about jumping from a second-story window because staying meant dying. The older woman in the front row was openly crying now. A younger man looked furious. Juror 7 still looked skeptical, but less than before. The prosecutor showed more photographs. Crime scenes, financial records, intercepted communications. Each one building a picture of an organization that treated human lives like commodities. "Do you have any reason to doubt the testimony you've given here today?" the prosecutor asked. "No." "Have you been coerced or threatened into testifying?" "Men have tried to coerce me not to testify, but I'm here because I choose to be." "Thank you, Miss Cade. Does the grand jury have any additional questions?" Silence. Then Juror 7 raised his hand again. "You said Mr. Vale protected you, that he gave you shelter and safety. But he also used you, didn't he? As part of his cooperation with the FBI?" There it was. The question Vera had been dreading. "I don't know what arrangements Mr. Vale had with law enforcement," she said carefully. "I only know what he did and didn't do to me personally. But you must have suspected something. A man like that doesn't just help people out of kindness." "You're right. He doesn't." Vera met Juror Seven's eyes. I think he helped me because it served his purposes. I think he kept me close because I made him look different than he was. And I think he knew that would make his enemies move against him in ways he could control. So you were a pawn. I was a person in an impossible situation trying to survive. Whether that made me a pawn depends on your definition. Vera's voice stayed level. But being used doesn't make what happened to me any less criminal. I was still kidnapped, still held against my will, still threatened with death when I tried to testify. Those things are true regardless of Ronin Vale's motives. Juror 7 sat back, apparently satisfied, or maybe just out of questions. The prosecutor thanked Vera and dismissed her. She stood on shaking legs and walked out of the room with as much dignity as she could manage. Morrison was waiting in the hall. How'd it go? I don't know, I think okay. Vera's voice came out hoarse. She hadn't realized how dry her throat was. Can I have water? An agent handed her a bottle. Vera drank half of it in one go, the cold shocking her system back to alertness. They'll deliberate now, Morrison said. Could take hours. We'll wait in a secure room upstairs. They moved toward the elevator, the same protective formation as before. But something felt different. Wrong. Vera couldn't identify what, just that the air had changed, gone tense in a way that made her skin prickle. Morrison felt it too. She saw him stiffen, his hand going to his weapon. What is it? Vera whispered. Don't know, but something's... The lights went out. Not gradually, all at once, plunging the hallway into darkness broken only by emergency lighting that kicked in after a 3-second delay. Red exit signs glowed like eyes. People started shouting. Backup power failure, someone said. That's not supposed to happen. Morrison grabbed Vera's arm. Move. Now! They ran toward the stairwell. Behind them, Vera heard more shouting, the sound of doors being kicked open. The agents around her had their weapons drawn, flashlights mounted under the barrels cutting through the dimness. The stairwell door burst open before they reached it. James Carson stood there, and he wasn't alone. 3 men with him, all armed, all moving with the kind of precision that said military training. Morrison shoved Vera behind him. Federal agents, drop your weapons! Carson smiled. It was the first expression Vera had seen on his face, and it made him look more dead than the photograph had. Can't do that, he said. His voice was calm, almost pleasant. Nothing personal, just business. He raised his gun. Morrison fired first. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. Carson dove sideways, returning fire. His men spread out using the doorframe as cover. Go, Morrison shouted at Vera. East stairwell, now! Vera ran. Behind her, gunfire erupted, sharp cracks that echoed off marble and made her ears ring. She heard Morrison shouting orders, heard return fire from the agents, heard screaming from civilians caught in the crossfire. The east stairwell was 50 feet away, 40, 30. Someone grabbed her from behind. Vera screamed and twisted, her self-defense instincts kicking in. She drove her elbow back into something soft, a stomach, and heard a grunt. The grip loosened. She spun and saw one of Carson's men, younger than the others, his face twisted in pain. He reached for her again. Vera grabbed a fire extinguisher from the wall mount and swung it like a weapon. It connected with his head with a sound that made her stomach turn. The man dropped. Vera didn't wait to see if he'd get up. She ran for the stairwell, threw open the door, and nearly fell down the first flight in her panic. Down. She needed to go down. To the garage where Morrison had said there would be backup vehicles and armed agents and ways out. She took the stairs as fast as she dared, her bandaged feet screaming in shoes that didn't fit right. Above her she heard more gunfire, a door slamming, footsteps pounding. They were following. Second floor, first floor. The door to the garage level appeared ahead. Vera hit it at full speed, bursting through into the underground parking area. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Cars sat in neat rows. No people. No agents. Nothing but concrete and silence that felt like a trap. Where was everyone? Vera ran toward where the SUVs had been parked. Empty spaces now, tire marks on the concrete showing they'd left in a hurry. Behind her, the stairwell door opened. She dove behind a concrete pillar, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break her ribs. Footsteps echoed through the garage, slow, methodical. Someone who knew she was here and wasn't worried about her getting away. Miss Cade, Carson's voice bounced off the concrete. This doesn't have to be difficult. Come out, and I'll make it quick. Vera pressed herself against the pillar, trying to control her breathing. Her eyes scanned for weapons, for exits, for anything that could help. She saw a maintenance door across the garage. 20 feet of open ground. She'd never make it. I know you're scared, Carson continued, his footsteps getting closer. That's natural, but you should know that your testimony doesn't matter. The grand jury will indict regardless. You're not changing anything by being here. You're just making this harder on yourself. Vera's hand found a piece of rebar on the ground, probably left by construction workers. It was heavy, rough with rust, about 2 feet long. Not much of a weapon, but better than nothing. The footsteps stopped. I can wait all day, Carson said. But my employer would prefer this resolved quickly, so I'm going to count to 10. If you're not out by then, I start shooting at pillars until I hit something. He started counting. Vera's mind raced. She couldn't run. He'd see her. Couldn't hide. He'd find her. Couldn't fight. He was trained and armed, and she had a piece of rebar. 5. Her only advantage was that he thought she was helpless, thought she'd cower and beg and make it easy. 7. Vera gripped the rebar and made a choice. 8. She stepped out from behind the pillar. Carson stood 30 feet away, his gun raised but not aimed directly at her. He looked almost disappointed. Smart decision, he said. I don't think so. Vera's voice shook but held. I think you're going to have to shoot me. And when you do, every federal agent in this building is going to hear it and come running. You might escape, but you'll be hunted for the rest of your life. I'm already hunted. Carson raised his gun, centering it on her chest. At least this way I get paid. Vera closed her eyes. The gunshot was impossibly loud, but she didn't feel pain. Didn't feel anything except the rush of air as something moved past her. She opened her eyes. Carson was on the ground, a red bloom spreading across his shoulder. Behind him, Morrison emerged from the stairwell, his weapon still raised, flanked by 4 agents who immediately swarmed Carson. Vera! Morrison shouted. You hurt? Vera looked down at herself, half expecting to see blood. But she was intact, shaking so hard she could barely stand, but intact. I'm okay, she managed. Morrison reached her in seconds, his hands checking her over with the same efficiency he'd used with the body armor. Carson had 2 men in the garage. They've been neutralized. Building's secure now. The others? The ones in the stairwell? In custody. Morrison's expression was grim. But there were casualties. 2 agents down, 3 civilians hit in the crossfire. It's bad, Vera. The words hit like a physical blow. People were dead. Because of her testimony. Because she'd refused to stay silent. I should have run, she whispered. When Thorne offered me the deal, I should have... No. Morrison's grip on her shoulders was firm. You did the right thing. The only thing. These men made their choices. They chose violence. That's on them, not you. But it didn't feel like it was on them. It felt like Vera had drawn a target on herself and everyone around her had paid the price. An agent approached. Sir, the grand jury is ready to deliver their decision. Already? Morrison frowned. That was fast. They apparently didn't need much time. Morrison looked at Vera. You want to hear it? Did she? Would knowing make any difference? The people who died were still dead. The ones who tried to kill her were still trying. A grand jury indictment didn't change any of that. But Vera had come this far. Might as well see it through. Yes, she said. They went back upstairs, through hallways now crawling with law enforcement. Crime scene tape blocked off areas where the shooting had happened. Medics worked on someone Vera couldn't see. The normalcy from before was gone, replaced by organized chaos. The grand jury room looked the same as when Vera had left it. The 23 people still in their tiered seats, but their faces had changed. Some looked shaken, others angry. The older woman who'd been crying wasn't crying anymore. She just looked tired. The foreman stood, a middle-aged black woman with gray-streaked hair and bifocals. We have reached a decision, she said formally. On the charges of kidnapping, conspiracy, attempted murder, racketeering, and human trafficking, the grand jury votes to indict. The prosecutor nodded. All defendants? All defendants named in the complaint, 27 individuals and 3 corporate entities. 27 people. Vera had helped indict 27 people. including Thorne, Nikolai, Carson, and probably some she'd never even heard of. "Thank you for your service," the prosecutor said. The jury filed out. Some of them looked at Vera as they passed, not with judgment, but with something like respect. Or maybe pity. Vera couldn't tell the difference anymore. Morrison touched her elbow. "Let's get you out of here." They used the secure elevator again, but this time there was no threat. Just exhaustion and the weight of what had happened settling over everything like ash. The SUV was waiting in the garage, its engine running. Vera climbed in and sank into the leather seat with a sigh that came from somewhere deep. "Where to?" the driver asked Morrison. "Safe house. The one we have set up for high-value witnesses." Morrison looked at Vera. "You'll stay there until the trials. Could be months." Months. Locked away from the world, waiting to testify again, to relive all of this in front of a real jury with real defendants staring at her. Vera wanted to protest, wanted to demand her life back. But she didn't have a life to go back to. That had been burned away weeks ago on a rainy night when she'd been thrown at a stranger's feet. "Okay," she said quietly. The drive took them out of the city into suburbs that looked manufactured in their perfection. Cookie-cutter houses with manicured lawns, SUVs in driveways, kids' toys scattered in yards. The kind of place where nothing bad ever happened. The safe house looked like all the others. Beige siding, two-car garage, a tree in the front yard that was trying too hard. Morrison walked her inside while agents swept the perimeter. The interior was nicer than her last safe apartment. Real furniture instead of catalog pieces. A kitchen with appliances that looked new. Windows with actual curtains. "You'll have protection 24/7, Morrison said. "Agents outside, panic button in every room, direct line to local PD. Thorne's still in the wind, and we have to assume he'll keep trying." "What about the trials? When do those start?" "Months? Maybe a year? Building cases like this takes time." Morrison's expression softened slightly. "I know this isn't what you wanted, but you're alive. That counts for something." Did it? Vera wasn't sure anymore. Being alive meant being afraid every moment of every day. Meant looking over her shoulder constantly. Meant knowing that Marcus Thorne was out there somewhere, planning another attempt. Maybe being dead would have been simpler. "Don't," Morrison said sharply, like he'd read her mind. "Don't go there. You survived for a reason." "What reason?" "To make sure these bastards face justice. To prove that victims aren't just collateral damage." He paused. "And because the world needs people who refuse to be silent." The words should have been inspiring. Instead, they just felt heavy. Another weight Vera had to carry. Morrison left. The agents took up positions outside, and Vera stood in the middle of the safe house living room, surrounded by furniture that wasn't hers and safety that felt like another kind of prison, and wondered if she'd made the right choice. The grand jury had indicted. That was good. That was progress. But Thorne was still free. Carson's men were still out there. And somewhere in witness protection, Ronin was starting a new life while Vera waited in limbo to testify again. Her phone rang, the new one Morrison had given her with exactly 3 numbers programmed in. She looked at the screen. Morrison. "What?" she answered. "Turn on the news, Channel 7. Vera found the remote, flipped on the TV. A news anchor appeared, her expression grave. Developing story. Marcus Thorne, wanted in connection with organized crime and multiple murder charges, was found dead this morning in a hotel room in Atlantic City. Police say it appears to be suicide, though the investigation is ongoing. The screen showed crime scene footage. Police tape, officers moving in and out of a hotel, a covered stretcher being wheeled to a coroner's van. Marcus Thorne was dead. Vera should have felt relief. Should have felt safe. Instead, she just felt numb. "It's over," Morrison said through the phone. "The main threat is gone. Carson's in federal custody. Most of Thorne's organization has been rolled up. You're safe, Vera." Safe. The word felt foreign, like something from another language Vera used to speak but had forgotten. "Thank you," she said automatically. "Get some rest. We'll talk tomorrow about next steps." He hung up. Vera stood there with the remote in her hand, watching the news cycle through its coverage. Thorne's photograph appeared on screen, professional headshot, expensive suit, the kind of image that screamed respectability. A monster in human skin. Gone now. dead by his own hand rather than face trial. The news moved on to other stories. A political scandal, weather predictions, sports scores, life continuing like nothing had happened. Vera turned off the TV. The silence that followed was absolute. No guards talking outside, no footsteps in the hallway, just Vera alone with her thoughts and the knowledge that she'd won. She'd survived, testified, helped bring down a criminal empire. So why did victory feel so much like loss? She walked through the safe house, checking locks she knew were already secure, peering out windows at agents she knew were there. Her feet hurt. Her whole body ached with exhaustion that went beyond physical. In the bathroom, she caught sight of herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. Same face, same eyes, but everything else was different, harder, older. The kind of worn that came from surviving things that should have killed you. Vera touched the glass, her fingers meeting their reflection. "You did it," she whispered to herself. "You're alive." But alive wasn't the same as okay, and Vera had the terrible suspicion that okay was something she'd never be again. Her phone buzzed, another text from the unknown number Ronin had used before, the one she'd blocked. Except this wasn't from a blocked number. It was from Morrison's contact. She opened it. "I lied about something else. I told you I kept you close to protect you. That was only half true. The other half is that I kept you close because losing you felt like it would cost more than winning. I know you'll never forgive me for using you. I don't forgive myself. But you should know, you changed everything, not just the cases or the takedowns, everything about how I see this world and my place in it. That's worth more than any deal I made with the FBI. I hope someday you believe that. R." Vera read the message 3 times. Then she deleted it like she had before. But this time she didn't block the number. Because somewhere under the anger and betrayal and exhaustion, a small part of her understood what Ronin meant. About being changed, about seeing the world differently after violence stripped away all the comfortable lies. She wasn't the same person who'd closed up a diner 4 weeks ago. That woman was gone, and whoever had replaced her was still being built. Still figuring out how to exist in a world where kindness was performance and protection came with strings attached, and survival meant accepting that nothing would ever be simple again. But she was here, alive, free, in a limited, heavily guarded sort of way. And tomorrow, she'd wake up and figure out what came next, one day at a time, one breath at a time. That was all anyone could do in a world like this. Vera turned off the lights and lay down in a bed that wasn't hers, in a house that wasn't home, and waited for sleep that came slowly and brought dreams of rain and iron gates and choices she couldn't take back. Outside, agents stood watch. Inside, Vera fought her own battles, against memory, against fear, against the terrible knowledge that surviving wasn't the same as winning. But she'd survived. And maybe eventually that would be enough. 6 months passed like water through a sieve, there but not substantial enough to hold. Vera learned the rhythms of the safe house the way prisoners learn their cells. Morning light through east-facing windows at 6:45. Agent shift change at 8, 2, and 10. The mailman who never delivered mail to her address because officially she didn't exist here. The neighbor's dog that barked at 7 every evening when its owner came home from work. Small details, meaningless patterns. They were all she had. The trial started in March when the last snow was melting and the world outside was thinking about spring. Vera testified in 4 separate proceedings over 8 weeks. Each time, she walked into a courtroom flanked by marshals and told her story to different juries who listened with varying degrees of sympathy. Some defendants took plea deals. Others fought to the bitter end. Nikolai Volkov went to trial and got 3 consecutive life sentences without parole. His lieutenant who'd held the gun to Vera's head got 40 years. Lower-level players got less, their sentences negotiated down in exchange for testimony against those higher up the chain. James Carson, surprisingly, cooperated. Gave up names and locations and details about murders Vera had never heard of in exchange for 30 years instead of life. He never looked at her during his testimony, never acknowledged that he'd hunted her through a courthouse garage with orders to kill. Vera watched him from the gallery and felt nothing. Not anger, not satisfaction, just the hollow awareness that this man had tried to end her life like it was a task on a checklist, and now he'd spend 3 decades in a cage because he'd failed. Ronin testified via video feed from an undisclosed location. Vera wasn't allowed in the courtroom for his testimony. Conflict of interest, they said, though she suspected it was more about keeping them separated. She watched on a monitor in a side room instead, Morrison standing beside her in case she had questions. Ronin looked different on screen. Thinner, maybe. His hair was darker, dyed, Vera assumed, part of his new identity. He wore glasses he hadn't needed before and a shirt she'd never seen. Everything about him screamed stranger except his voice, which was exactly the same, calm and measured and careful with words. He spent 6 hours detailing the structure of organized crime in the city, named names, traced money, explained operations that had been running for decades. He was clinical about it, showing no emotion when describing murders he'd ordered or violence he'd overseen. The defense attorneys tried to rattle him, called him a liar, a murderer, a man who'd sell out anyone to save his own skin. Ronin took it all without flinching. "Everything you're saying is true," he told one particularly aggressive lawyer. "I am a murderer. I did sell out my associates, and I'm doing it because I'm tired of what I was and I want to be something else. You can question my motives, but you can't question my information. Everything I've told you is verifiable." They couldn't argue with that. The paper trail backed up every claim Ronin made. When his testimony ended, Morrison turned off the monitor. "You want to talk about it?" "No," Vera said. She didn't. What was there to say? That seeing Ronin's face had made her chest tight? That hearing his voice had brought back memories of breakfast conversations and quiet moments that probably hadn't been real? That part of her still wanted to believe he'd kept her safe for reasons beyond manipulation? It didn't matter what she wanted to believe. The facts were clear. Ronin had used her, and she'd survived it, and now they were both living in the aftermath. That was all there was. The trials concluded in late April. Vera testified for the last time on a Thursday afternoon, answering questions she'd answered a dozen times before, telling her story to a jury that convicted in 4 hours. Morrison drove her back to the safe house himself that evening. They didn't talk much. What was there to say? The system had worked, barely, messily, at tremendous cost, but it had worked. Guilty verdicts across the board, decades of prison time handed down, an entire criminal infrastructure dismantled. "What happens now?" Vera asked as they pulled into the driveway. Morrison put the car in park but didn't turn off the engine. "Now you get to decide. We can keep you in witness protection if you want. New name, new city, fresh start. Or you can reclaim your old identity and try to rebuild." "Rebuild what? I have no job, no apartment, no connections. Everyone I knew thinks I disappeared." "Then make new connections. Find a new job. You're not the same person you were 6 months ago. Don't try to live her life. Build a different one." Vera looked at the safe house with its beige siding and manufactured normalcy. She'd been safe here in the way a museum exhibit is safe. Preserved, protected, but not alive. "I don't know how," she admitted. Morrison was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. "This is from Vale. It came through official channels 2 weeks ago. I wasn't sure if I should give it to you, but..." He handed it to her. "You've earned the right to decide what to do with it." Vera took the envelope. It was thin, just a single sheet of paper inside from what she could feel. Her name was written on the front in handwriting she didn't recognize, probably whoever had written it for Ronin, since he couldn't contact her directly. "Thank you," she said. Morrison nodded. "You did good, Vera. Better than good. You stood up when most people would have run, and you helped put monsters away. That takes courage most people don't have." "I don't feel courageous. I feel tired. That's what courage costs. The movies don't tell you that part." Morrison shifted the car back into drive. "Get some rest. Someone will be in touch about next steps." Vera climbed out and watched him drive away. The agents on duty nodded to her as she went inside, their faces familiar after months of rotating shifts. She locked the door, habit now, not fear, and sat on the couch with the envelope unopened in her hands. Part of her wanted to tear it up without reading it. What could Ronin possibly say that would change anything? He'd used her, she'd survived, and now they were both living with the consequences. Opening this would just reopen wounds that were barely starting to scab over. But another part of her, the part that still remembered how he'd asked if she was hurt instead of blaming her for broken china, needed to know what was inside. Vera opened the envelope. The letter was short. Ronin's actual handwriting this time, not a proxy's. She recognized it from documents she'd seen during the trials. Vera, by the time you read this, the trials will be over and you'll be deciding what comes next. I won't insult you by offering advice. You've proven you don't need mine or anyone else's. What I will do is tell you something I should have said months ago. You were right. About everything. I did use you. I did manipulate the situation to serve my purposes. And I told myself it was necessary, that the ends justified the means, that keeping you safe was enough to offset the deception. It wasn't. Nothing justifies what I did to you. You asked me once why I didn't kill you that first night. I told you it was because I wasn't the man Gregor thought I was. That was true, but incomplete. The whole truth is that looking at you, beaten and terrified and still refusing to cry, reminded me of someone I used to be. Before I became what I became. And some buried part of me thought maybe if I could protect you, it would prove I wasn't completely beyond redemption, selfish. Even my attempts at decency were selfish. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But you should know that testifying against everyone I'd built my life around, burning down everything I'd constructed over 20 years, that was the easy part. The hard part is living with what I did to you, what I turned you into. You weren't a victim when they threw you at my feet. You were a survivor, and I took that survival and weaponized it for my own purposes. I made you believe you had choices when really I'd engineered all your options. If I could take it back, I would. But I can't. So instead, I'm asking you to do something for me. Not because you owe me anything, you don't. But because you deserve it. Live. Not just survive, but actually live. Build something that's yours and no one else's. Don't let what happened to you define the rest of your life. You're stronger than that. Braver than that. I know because I watched you become it. The FBI has set up a trust fund in your name. Enough money to start over anywhere you want, go to school, whatever you need. It's not payment or apology or anything that could make this right. It's just a tool. Use it or don't, but know that it exists. One last thing. You told Nikolai he was afraid of being wrong about everything he'd built his life on. You were right about him. You were also right about me. I was terrified that tearing down the system meant admitting I'd wasted 20 years building something monstrous. That every choice I'd made, every person I'd hurt, had been for nothing. Watching you stand up to him, watching you refuse to be used as a shield, that broke something open. Proved that there was another way. That strength didn't have to mean cruelty. You did that. Not me. You. I'll never contact you again after this. You've earned the right to never think about me or what happened, to build a life where I'm just a bad memory that eventually fades. But if you do think about it sometimes, I hope you remember this. You survived. You testified. You helped bring down an empire built on suffering, and you did it by refusing to be what they tried to make you. That's more than courage. That's transformation. Thank you for being brave enough to exist. Our Vera read the letter twice, then a third time. Her hands shook slightly, making the paper tremble. A trust fund. Money to start over. Ronin's version of making amends, as if money could undo manipulation or buy back the weeks she'd spent as a pawn in his game. She should have been angry, should have torn up the letter and told Morrison to reject the money and cut off any connection to Ronin Vale forever. Instead, she just felt hollow, tired in a way sleep couldn't fix. Because Ronin was right about one thing, she had transformed. The woman who'd closed up a diner 6 months ago wouldn't have stood in front of Nikolai's guns, wouldn't have jumped from a second-story window, wouldn't have testified in front of juries knowing it could get her killed. That woman had been erased the moment Victor's hands had grabbed her off the street. What was left wasn't better or worse, just different, harder, more aware of how quickly safety could be stripped away and how little control anyone really had over their own life. Vera folded the letter and put it back in the envelope. Then she walked to her bedroom, the one that still didn't feel like hers after 6 months, and pulled out the burner phone Morrison had given her for emergencies. She dialed a number she'd memorized but never used. It rang 3 times before someone picked up. Victim Services, this is Sarah speaking. The kind voice from the FBI building. The woman who'd given Vera pamphlets about trauma resources and safe housing. This is Vera Cade, Vera said. You told me to call if I ever needed help with next steps. I'm ready now. Of course. What are you thinking? I want to leave the city, somewhere quiet. Somewhere I can figure out who I am when I'm not afraid. Vera's voice steadied as she spoke. And I want to go to school, finish my degree, maybe study law or social work or something that lets me help people who've been through what I went through. Those are good goals. Sarah's smile was audible through the phone. We can make that happen. Give me a few days to set things up. Where are you thinking? Vera hadn't thought that far ahead. But now that Sarah asked, an answer came immediately. Somewhere with mountains, and seasons that actually change, and somewhere that doesn't remind me of here. I know a few places. Let me do some research and I'll call you back with options. Thank you. Vera hung up and sat on the bed, the phone still in her hand. Outside, the neighbor's dog started barking, 7 o'clock on the dot. Some patterns were just patterns. They didn't mean anything except that time passed and life continued regardless of who was ready for it. 3 days later, Sarah called back with options. Vera chose a small college town in Colorado, population 30,000, surrounded by mountains, far enough from her old life that she could pretend it had happened to someone else. The FBI helped arrange everything. Enrollment in the State University's social work program starting in the fall, a small apartment near campus, a part-time job at a bookstore that didn't ask questions.